And we're live.
Hello.
Hello, everyone. And welcome to round 3 of critically reviewing the Stormlight archive. Today will be a mess.
Yes.
Yes, it's gonna be a mess.
I guess for anyone who's here for the first time, although I don't know why you'd start with book 3 for the first one. The three of us, so me, Sarah, Steff, and Sylla, for the past over 6 months now, have started rereading the Stormlight archive to prepare for the release of Wind and Truth. So the finale of the first arc of the Stormlight archive. And we have not just been rereading, but we've decided to reread specifically with a critical eye to all of Sanderson's problems. And we're suffering. And I think we haven't done as bad as this one so far. I remember that with the first live show that we did, all the other live shows are linked in the description as well, by the way. Me and Steff didn't finish, I think, and only Sylla finished. Mm-hmm. This time only I finished, but I think there's more collective pages that haven't been read.
I don't know. Wait, what percentage did you get to, Sylla?
I think with the second part, I'm at 75 or something around those lines.
Okay.
No idea how that translates to like actual percentage of the complete book.
Okay, so of the second half of the book, you're at 75%.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, I think I'm somewhere around there too. Like, I have less than 200 pages left in my full version, so somewhere
it could be worse, but also we did suffer so much.
Listen,
and
we read 1,000 pages.
Another info I think that might be important, we had originally given ourselves 2 additional weeks to finish.
We tried. I needed a break, okay? I totally accept that it's partly my fault. It's entirely my fault. But like, after we agreed that we were going to give ourselves an extension, I took like 4 days off. I need
Same though.
I think the extension gave every single one of us the brain of like, yeah, we have time now, right? So we can take time. And then we took the time, and that was the problem.
Anyway, so obviously we've been reading Oathbringer. Yeah, personally, I still enjoyed this the least so far out of the books.
Solid agreement there.
I'm on the fence. I'm on the fence, and I can't tell if the reason that I'm on the fence is because I disliked Shallan so much in book 2. And okay, I'm going to jump into something here that I want us to talk about more later, but I think this is a big reason for it for me, is that in Oathbringer, they reference scenes from book 2 a lot, and even some scenes from book 1, but a lot of like Kaladin thinking back to that one specific scene that we spent 2 hours dissecting last time is referenced with such like awe, and I'm just like, no. So what that does something for me, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe let's start where we always start. Let's start with the things we actually like.
Fair.
And the interesting thing for me with this book, more than with any other books, there were scenes that a lot of times started with, actually, I like this. Actually, there might be some points made. Mm-hmm. And then I move on later in the paragraph, and suddenly it's like, why did we not just stop at this character having this realization?
Yes.
Yes.
See,
I
the thing
believe
is,
it.
for everyone, we have 2 Discord channels for each book at the very least, and one is reserved for, you know, the scenes we liked or things we enjoyed or something like that. And we all collectively had such a hard time putting anything into that channel because, as Sarah said, so many scenes started out with, "This is great, but..."
Yeah.
It was such a struggle.
I think I do actually have such a scene tabbed in blue. Blue is the stuff that I liked. I have 2 whole tabs in this one, where I think it was, I don't know if it was Ken or Sa, one of the Kaladins that the Parshmen meet. One of the Parshmen or the singers that Kaladin meets at the beginning of the book, where Kaladin tries to be all like, you know, I've also been a slave, I can relate to you, whatever. And then, I don't remember if it was Ken or Sa, just like fully loses his shit and is like, you do not know what it's like. Yes, we were both slaves, but you still had your mind. You still had some of yourself. I have lived my whole life in a fog, which is such like, I'm sorry, just a second. I have spent my entire life living in a fog, the Parshmen yelled at him. Every day knowing I should say something, do something to stop this. Every night clutching my daughter, wondering why the world seems to move around us in the light, while we are trapped in the shadows. They sold her mother, sold her, because she had birthed a healthy child, which made her good breeding stock. Do you understand that, human? Do you understand watching your family be torn apart and knowing you should object, knowing deep in your soul that something is profoundly wrong? Can you know that feeling of being unable to say a single storming word to stop it? They may have taken your freedom, but they took our minds. And like, if that had been acknowledged and if that had led to a moment of realization for Kaladin, this would have been such an amazing thing. And I still think this passage, which like I like this, is literally just this paragraph, would have been so great. But like, Kaladin just like, it ends with,
it doesn't go anywhere.
Kaladin walked with them and remembered he did understand a little. It's like,
no, it doesn't do anything.
The thing is also, the problem with scenes like that is like, sure, of course, fine, whatever. The as they were called Parshmen were only freed towards the end of the second book. All right. But for anyone who has never read the Stormlight Archive, we are quite literally over 2,000 pages into the series at the end of book 2, okay? It took over 2,000 pages to even start addressing the fact that these poor people have been kept as slaves for centuries. And this is the very,
actually,
a very long-ass time. Time in this series. Neither we nor Brandon Sanderson, to be honest.
I mean, Josh isn't here to tell us exactly when the Day of Recreance was, but
Josh,
you know,
please come back into the chat. We desperately need you.
Point is long enough.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, like, fine, all right. I guess that we have to start somewhere with the whole, like, you know, people, like the human cast of this book finally understanding what's happening. That's fine, that's all cool, but we then also never go with it anywhere. And I feel like if you need over 2,000 pages to even start addressing something and then it's just kind of glossed over again, that is not something to be proud of as an author whatsoever.
Also, it's once again like really lost potential in a way, because it would have been great starting with that and starting with Kaladin having, like, it would have been such a great arc for Kaladin. Starting with this realization, and then obviously we end the book with the realization humans are colonizers. They are not native to Roshar. The singers and the listeners are the native people of Roshar. Exactly. So you could have had like a full arc with that realization that you can then move on with in Rhythms of War, which is not moved on with, ironically, even though Even though, you know, the title hints at a centering of the singers, but I guess, you know, we can't have that anyway.
We can't do more than hints, Sarah, because that's illegal.
So I have two things I want to add to that. Well, one being that we didn't add the caveat in this video that yes, we have all read the entire series before. This is a reread for us. So even though two of us didn't finish, we get the idea of what happens, right? So I'm putting that to the side for a second. Two things I want to say is I really felt like this is the first of the books where Sanderson touched on all of the complaints that we had and started it and was like, oh, okay, we're going to talk about that. And then, like you said, it just immediately ends, right? And something that I think illustrates that is there is a scene later on where Navani is getting all of the kings, queens, and leaders of different nations in a room to finally talk about what they're going to do about what's happening. And there are 4 pages dedicated to describing the chairs and the way that everybody sits in a circle. But there is nothing even a quarter of that dedicated to each of the important conversations around intersectional experiences, misogyny, colonialism. It's just everything ends after a paragraph. And that to me just feels like, I feel like he's aware of what he's doing, but he doesn't have the means to talk about it, or is just using it in a way that feels like it's falling so flat and superficial.
Absolutely, especially the superficial part. Fully agree with that. I do want to add one thing that I liked. It is very small, but it gave me great joy, which is Sabariel and Paloma looking at a dead Sadias and going, why is this our problem now? He's dead.
Thank you. We did not need the murder mystery, in my opinion. I was like, please move on.
I love these two specifically in so many scenes because Sabariel sometimes, you know, unfortunately for my brain cells, is the only voice of reason in a room because he just shit talks people in the funniest way possible and then just exits the scene. Fantastic character.
I'm sorry, there's nothing wrong with him. He's like... he's too self-aware of the problems of a Lethe society to be a problem.
Yes.
The problem is that self-awareness somehow doesn't translate to Sanderson because Zavarian is supposed to be this somewhat silly comedic relief character. And then he's actually the realest of them all.
Yes.
It's so great. Like every time in that one meeting Navani makes where she's like, you know, Sabaria, shut the fuck up. I'm like, no, let the man speak.
Yes, he's cooking. Let him cook. So sad.
Literally. And it's always played as a like strange thing that, you know, he has his mistress, Paloma, or whatever. But also somehow Sanderson, even just accidentally, manages to make him so, even though he's very self-deprecating, genuinely appreciate her.
Yeah. Like I feel like these two are the best romance that Sanderson has ever created. And it is both entirely by accident and like, you know, cut down every single time. Like I'm pretty sure the amount of screen time both of these people have together is like, I don't know, half a chapter maybe, but like every single time they're there, I'm like, yes, my man.
Oh, are we talking about romance now? Because I have things to say.
I have one last like positive thing that I still found, and that was like at the very beginning because I was looking into it again, like the reuniting of Kaladin with his parents. I do think that like Sanderson did hit the emotional beats really well there, with Kaladin being like so scared almost of meeting his parents because he couldn't protect his little brother. And it becomes so apparent that, you know, he blames himself. And his parents are just like, no, at least one of my children or of our children came back and you're here again. And it does somewhat, you know, it is for Sanderson, who is not that great at setting up character arcs and themes. It does work with the whole thing within this book and the next of the biggest problem why Kaladin can't move forward or whatever, or can't develop as a character, is because he always blamed, like, he's so scared of not being able to protect someone, and he always blames himself. So it does set that up already in a more concrete way than it was in previous books. That being said, the rest of the dark is being fucked up in this book, so like
doesn't matter. I totally
sighing over here like, God, does it even matter to say something positive when it's ruined in the exact same book it comes up? Because I would have another entry for that, actually.
Go.
Which is, I do, to a certain degree, appreciate Shallan as a character more in book 3. Because this is where Brandon Sanderson finally starts doing a few interesting things with her character, actually. Because we do get to the whole, like, her identity being overtaken by the altars that she creates in a certain way. And we get a bit more into the whole, like, making her character less about just a privileged white girl and a little bit more about a privileged white girl with mental health issues. The problem is that, first of all, this is coming in book 3, which, again, makes you feel like we had all that build-up for absolutely nothing before. Fantastic. That's great. We're moving at a glacial pace here. And then also there's this issue that it completely overshadows so many other things in these books that I wish we would talk about some more. So I'm over here like, I both like it and I hate it, because it is going to take away so much from other characters and other issues that we could be talking about. And instead, I just have to worry about Shallan again, because she is now actually kind of growing on me, and I hate that.
Well, my interest in what is happening with her story arc is overshadowed by my deep distaste that Kaladin still looks at her, even though he is a man who has experienced horrible things and chattel slavery, looks at her and says, she can teach me about getting out of depression, but like not the same. Again, I really am struggling to think about how Sanderson said, yes, I can write about intersectional experiences, because this is not it. But going back to things that I did like, Adolin grew on me a lot in this book. And I have such a soft spot for Renarin, so there's that.
Yes. I think Adolin was one of the best characters, because he is, unfortunately, one of the most consistent characters Brandon Sanderson has ever written in the entire series.
The thing I hate, though, about Adolin's character is that Sanderson is good at writing Adolin himself consistent. He's really not good at writing how other characters think about Adolin. Because somehow everyone is just like, well, he's just this silly little guy and he's kind of stupid and he doesn't know shit and whatever. And it's like, no, Adolin from a young age has probably learned tactics, strategy, how to move around at court. We see that he's really, really good at like charming people. Like he is smart. But then you have such scenes where Adolin suddenly asks Shallan, who has been among those people for a few months at most, who has grown up incredibly sheltered, and he asks her for like her opinion and to help him because, oh my God, I'm just a silly little guy and I don't know how to move. Like, what should I tactically do so that the big bad wolves don't eat me up? And it's like, Shallan doesn't know. Shallan shouldn't know. But like, and it wasn't like that in the 2 previous books. But as soon as the relationship between Shallan and Adolin is developed, it's like Sanderson can't write him as a character anymore who's allowed to do things on his own. And I actually really like the ending of him. Like, I think he should have focused a lot more around that and made him a lot more like, Adolin is the person who really got them out of Kholinar. Adolin is the one who's like, okay, I cannot grieve now. I have to move on. Adolin is the one who kept them moving throughout Shadesmar. However, he's not really given that spotlight that much. But no, as soon as Kaladin is like somewhat fine again, Adolin is pushed to the side again. And he does have those moments of doubts that I think are really great for him as a character, because it's like, I'm surrounded by radiance and I'm like, I don't know if any of you got as far as the final battle?
Nope.
No, I think I'm right before that.
Really, it becomes really apparent there, where once they're back in, I forgot what the different planes are called, but when they're in Thailand City, and Dalinar gives everyone their roles, and it's just like a bunch of radiance, and Adolin is like, I don't know what I'm like. Who am I to pretend to be able to do anything among those? But he once again, he like gets his shit together, and he's actually really helpful and helps direct the Thailand people a lot and stuff, because that's the stuff that he knows to do. So he has like those really interesting conflicts, but because everyone else is more important to Sanderson, and like he so often takes a back seat and even has to become the more stupid guy, so the others seem smarter, so Shallan can, you know, show how smart she is. It's so frustrating.
Which is also a little bit weird, because I might be conflating things here, because Brandon Sanderson is incredibly shit at doing his gendered system or whatever.
Oh my god.
But
so bad.
aren't women, it's horrible, but aren't women not supposed to be the ones to do like strategy and shit? Is that not men because it's too close to ruling? Who fucking knows? But like, it always feels so weird to me. I mean, first of all, the system sucks. But second of all, it feels so weird to me because, again, we have this focus on Shallan being the one to know what exactly is happening, which we have already established, or Sarah has established, and Steph and I agree full-heartedly, is bullshit, because she's met these people like a few weeks ago at most. But also, isn't all of this more connected to the military, and so shouldn't he then be the one to know about it?
I mean,
I feel like Sanderson is just confusing his own metaphors the entire time.
The thing he usually talks about is not necessarily military, but like court politics stuff. But it's still like Adolin is the one who grew up.
Yeah. Which is, and in that same vein, it's like the same
way earlier.
The same decisions that Adolin is making that are turning him into this leader. The book spends so much time up Dalinar's butt talking about how he is this great leader. He's a politician. He does all of these things, but like Adolin doesn't get any of that time. And I'm like, why are we talking about Dalinar? Dalinar is the worst politician. He's just, and again, it's the fault of the system, which I think it needs to be said that like, it's clear that it's supposed to be faulty, that there are characters in the other like Thaylens and all these other places that they visit, that they're judging each other and there's some criticism about it. But it just, again, it doesn't go anywhere with it as far as we're concerned. There's just like one-liners of, oh, well, we have women in Bridge 4 now. So like, cool.
We have one named woman in Bridge 4. One.
It's the same thing though with Jasnah ending up as king. Like I don't know. I feel like Adolin would have been way more, even with along the story and with his personality, would have been way more set up as king. And sure, he doesn't want to be or whatever, but it feels like almost Sanderson didn't want Adolin to be king because Adolin is needed as a supporting character to these amazing Radiants. And that's his role. And so instead of giving him his own arc and having him grow into his own, even like, okay, sure, maybe you can't instantly make him king or whatever. It's like, you're not allowed to do that. And it would be such a, sure, it's not a subversion of tropes or whatever. It would be a very traditional role where Adolin is like, you know, I wanted to be just a fun guy or whatever. I'm next in line to the throne. I don't want this, yada, yada. But no, we instead have to give a symbolic nod or whatever to feminism and have Jasnah be king now.
Jasnah, who can't even be on page without somebody mentioning her atheism. Like, can we just not talk about it anymore? Why is it relevant? It just doesn't feel relevant at all.
Oh, we're gonna have a whole ass section about religion in this one, I feel like, because I have things to say. They don't just include Jasna, but they include a lot of things.
Yeah, like wouldn't it make sense? I guess Adolin in that direction also doesn't make sense to be king, but like if you have an atheist, like we just earlier in like a few chapters earlier had the Queen of Thailand, whatever. We had Fen.
Who, by the way, is one of the more deep characters, might I add.
Yeah.
She just gets ruined consistently.
Yeah. We have Fen saying that like Dalinar being excommunicated is a problem because apparently that could lead to like a religious upturning of like society, whatever, in her country for reasons, because Dalinar being excommunicated is somehow important for the Thailand people. Who knows? I don't fucking know why exactly, but apparently there's a lot of people following the passions in Thailand, which according to Wiki isn't even properly a religion, but more like a philosophy, like Taoism, or like a lot of the Chinese, historically Chinese, or Buddhism less so, but like a philosophy religion thing, which by the way, it doesn't come across to me, but then again, we don't really get a lot from the passions or anything but Warrenism.
Do you mean more like maybe Confucianism as well? Like in that direction?
That was the thing.
There you go.
The one I was looking for. So, and apparently because Dalinar was excommunicated, that could lead to the people following the passions in Thailand wanting, like, seeing this as a reason to finally also overthrow the power of the Warren Church within Thailand for some reason. I don't know. And that's a big problem because it's the apocalypse and we can't have a religious crisis state right now. But wouldn't the same argument also count for, like, Alethkar suddenly having an atheist queen?
In fact, it would be worse because the thing is that Dalinar has turned heretic only in the past months or so, right? So you could still make the valid argument that, you know, maybe people could get him back to the Warren Church if they just tried really hard or whatever. But Jasna has been an atheist her entire life. It is, in fact, her defining character trait, according to Brandon Sanderson. So, like that and being a bitch. But that's a different thing. Not necessarily connected, but maybe sometimes. But like, it is an established fact that Jasna is an atheist from the very start, to the point where Shallan herself basically asked her to be less disrespectful around her because she feels uncomfortable with that, because she is a lot more religious, in fact, which, you know, is also a very fine argument to make. I don't necessarily blame her for that. I blame her for a lot of other things. So, like, it makes even less sense for people to be accepting of Jasna as a king because, one, it goes against any and all gender stuff that happens in Alethkar, period. And two, she's the worst choice if you just pages previously talked about the fact that having a heretic and excommunicated person as a king is bad. This is exponentially worse.
Also, Jasna is not a good choice as a queen.
No.
Like, she has zero diplomacy. Zero. Nothing. Like,
it is absolutely horrible. It is absolutely horrible.
I love that in Rhythm of War, one of her first things she does as king is, like, be like, okay, we're not gonna do slavery anymore. She also talked about genociding singers in this one, though. So
yes, she did. She did. Like, for me, it's the fact that we don't get any time to sit with that and experience any kind of turmoil that should come from her getting this position after we spent close to 3,000 pages of people trying to say that she needs to change or we have a problem on our hands. But she's just elevated and it's like, okay, she gets to make decisions now. Not much pushback, not much backlash. Everyone thinks she's great. Shallan thinks back to when she, like, murdered people in an alley that she lured there and thinks she's so wonderful. I mean, nothing.
Great times, great bonding also, experience with your mentor.
back again, maybe it would have been a good idea for Adolin to be king because he's not a Radiant.
Fair.
Because isn't there the whole thing of like Radiants once upon a time kind of being like outside, but also spanning international political structures?
100%. 100%. I mean, it isn't that kind of like the entire reason why Orthera existed in the first place? Because it was like a gathering place for Radiants or something?
Yeah.
Am I mixing things up here? Fantastic.
I think that's right.
Great. So since we're already in the camp of complaining about shit, let's just kick us off here with the biggest point that I have so far consistently made throughout the books, which, by the way, is very well illuminated with the entire discussion we just had about Dalinar and Jasnah and King and whatnot, which is that these stories are so intensely character-focused, but Brandon Sanderson consistently tries to talk about issues that span beyond single characters. Because as a single character arc, it is kind of interesting to see someone like Jasnah, who is at first maybe not necessarily outlawed for her views, but like critically regarded within society for her specific views and her specific behaviors, which again, very strange, but all right. It's an interesting character choice to have someone like that suddenly be in the center of attention by becoming the king of Alethkar. But it just does not make sense in the wider social construct that Brandon Sanderson tries to talk about every once in a while, which, for example, includes the fact that women are technically not even supposed to be someone who makes any kind of, decisions for a country. And then there's also the entire thing of Alethkar just randomly falling. Like that, without us ever having even established Alethkar fully in the first place, because we spent the entire 2 books more or less in the Shattered Plains in a consistent war situation, without ever going back to Alethkar, except for one sentence, which was basically like, yeah, like, I left my queen there, like, she's probably doing stuff, but we haven't talked in, like, months. And you're like, okay, so that does not worry you? Okay.
I don't even know. There's so many thoughts I have right now, and I don't even know where to go with that. There's so many branches.
To be honest, I don't even remember with the whole thing with Alethkar and stuff. I don't even remember if it was established previous to this book that Elhokar has a son.
I
think
which is also really confusing because like Gaff is what, 3 years old, 4 years old?
Something like that.
Hasn't Elhokar been at the Shattered Plains for the past 6 years?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, again, I could be wrong. I feel like it might have been alluded to that he had a family or something, because if I remember correctly in the last book, that it was very much Dalinar calling him boy and son and whatever. We're like, this is a grown-ass man with a family. Like, what are you talking about?
I knew he had a wife.
Yeah, at least that, yeah.
I'm not sure if her name ever fell before this book, which, again, weird-ass choice, but whatever.
I think in the second prologue, was the second prologue the one that was from Jasnah's point of view?
It might have been. Or it was this one. I don't remember which one.
I think it was in the second prologue because Jasnah wanted to assassinate Aesodan.
Which is also fantastic, right? Like, we just never talk about that ever again as well.
It's also a funny thing where it's, again, like, what is the role of women? Like, how exactly... Because Aesodan, when we were first introduced to her as a concept character in the second book, is like, apparently she's not a great person. Like, this person that we're somewhat supposed to trust the judgment of wants to assassinate her. However, she somehow has been the regent of Kholinar for the past 6 years, which makes no sense. Because
I don't remember
able to be regent.
I do think that Navani arrived at the Shattered Plains a lot later than the rest of the characters. I have no idea about Elhokar because I did not read the first book closely enough for that, but I'm pretty sure Navani arrives at the Shattered Plains through the happenings of the first book, which does take place a few years after this thing. So Navani has been insinuated to be in Kholinar this entire time, at least that's what I'm assuming. So a lot of things make even less sense now because all of a sudden we have this thing, because for anyone who's watching this who has not read the books, when we talk about Kholinar, we talk about one city. Yes, it is probably what you should call the capital of Alethkar, but it is one city. And what happens in book 3 is that one city falls to a new army of fused, which is a whole other concept we're gonna unpack a lot. It's gonna be bad, trust us. So like this is one city that falls. Yes, probably a strategic city, probably with a lot of military there, because again, main city and all that, yada yada. But the way that we shift from this one city,
I would say not that much military, because they pretty much have the city guard. Like, unless almost everyone of the city guard has died, there's not that much military left in the city.
Yes, they did mention that the wall guard or whatever was significantly smaller than the troops that they brought.
That is very true. So, like, you have this situation, and what happens in book 3 is the city falls. The city falls, and all of a sudden, like, a chapter after this happens, we go, yeah, Alethkar has fallen completely. And I'm over here like, I'm sorry. First of all, Alethkar has been a complete country under one leadership for, like, less than a decade at this point. So, I have questions.
Yeah, and in that same vein, I have questions about that we haven't revisited what the effects of using all of their resources to jump into the war in the Shattered Plains, because we get a little bit of this idea that Kholinar was under like rule by the enemy, quote unquote, that people were starving, that, you know, people were going through hard times, that people who had the ability to help them weren't helping them, whatever the case is. But it's very much framed in a way where it's a direct response of the fused coming in and the Parshmen, you know, being sent out and being awakened. But we never get anything about what the consequences are of this entire civilization being a warmongering civilization and sending all of their resources to a war that's off on the edge of their land. Like, it's just, it continues to be framed in a way where they're still not wrong, and we're still getting like a very small tunnel vision view from the perspective of the characters that have the most power and thinking everything is fine and dandy.
Yeah, and like it would make sense, for example, like I think there was something like in the first book when Dalinar wanted to get Elhokar back to Alethkar, where it was like, no, we can't continue focusing on the Shattered Plains because we're such a young country and everything's going to shit somewhere else or whatever. But like we could have within this book, even just if it's about the fused and the singers and Odium, we could have gone the direction of like there are multiple high princes. We have Sabriel, we have, I think, Adalar or whatever he was called died last.
I think
book.
Aladar, but yeah, kind of like that.
There's something. Amaram. There's like we have those different high princes. If we had discussions every now and again in the war councils, the different high princes talking about how their perspective princedoms of Alethkar have now fallen or are close to falling or whatever, then it would have been understandable, like with Alethkar, not Alethkar, Kholinar being under siege now as well, and the communication having cut off, that's a big deal. That's something that we have to do. And even like, okay, Elhokar, that's also the thing where Elhokar as a character isn't set up enough. So like if we had focused more on him and him now being like, okay, maybe Kholinar isn't that strategically important right now anymore, but you know, to him personally, which comes through a little bit, it's very important to save his wife and his child because he wants to be a better person, whatever. And it's the whole thing where, you know, just before he's killed, he's almost ready to say the words to become a Radiant, which also comes so out of nowhere because he's not a character that we focus on. And so I don't even feel bad for that happening.
Yes.
It's like it's whatever. Or we can, but like it's not. I'm sorry, that might sound like an asshole move, but it's not that critically important. Even to get Elhokar's heir. His heir is 3 years old. And the second and third in command are Adolin and Renarin. And sure, maybe Renarin in Alethi society isn't seen as very strong or very capable, but Elhokar still has at least 2 heirs right now. So, like, it's not that critically important to get to Kholinar and to free Kholinar, except for Elhokar's personal reasons.
Oh, hold on one second. My cat's meowing. Give me a second.
Slightly set up, we can't really, like, we don't really follow him, so it's whatever.
Yeah. It's honestly, like, again, it's this thing where Sanderson is trying to focus very hard. Hi, back. Welcome back.
Hi. Sorry, I had to get my cat.
How dare you not show us the cat, by the way? That's a criminal.
She's running over there and crying for me to go over there, and I'm like, no, you come here.
You're like, baby, I'm busy. Come over here so mommy can so mommy can do something with you or whatever.
Okay, what were you saying?
Like, this is
the last thing. Yeah. The last thing was also the thing where Sanderson tried to hand wave it away with Kaladin being like, I haven't heard you talk about your wife and kid in like all the time I've known you. Why are they suddenly so important? It's like, just because you have a character acknowledge that this happened doesn't mean that it's not very obvious that you as an author forgot about them.
Yes. Okay. I'm going to jump in here and say, like, I know that the death of Elhokar is such an important pivoting point as to how a lot of the fandom feel about Elhokar and Moash, and I have things to say about Moash, but we're not going to put that to the side for a second. Like, the fact is
felt like you were putting a hand over my mouth, like, it's okay.
We'll get there. But the point is that the build up to Elhokar's death felt so forced that every single time a character, like, he would make a decision, which to me just felt like, sure, whatever, you're making a decision, but like nothing out of the ordinary of what you should have been doing this whole time. And a character would think to themselves, oh my goodness, he actually is a good king. He's a good man. And I'm just like, where? No, he's not. No, this is you forcing me to want to have feelings for him, but you're forcing this square emotion into a round hole. And I'm just like, when he dies, I feel nothing.
Yes. See, this is the thing that I do also want to mention, like, as we said, we have previously read the series, and like every single one of us has had emotions over the series, okay? Like very deep emotions. I'm pretty sure I've cried multiple times reading this for the first time, okay? I'm gonna be fully honest here. I never cried during Elhokar's death, because from the very first time I read about it, I was like, okay, now what?
And also, the interesting thing is, when I remembered Oathbringer, I remembered like Elhokar's death being like pivotal to Kaladin's arc because it kind of symbolizes his failure. And it's where he's then like the entire time that they're going through Shadesmar, he's like, I need to get back to Dalinar, I need to get back to Dalinar because I need to protect Dalinar or whatever. On reread, not gonna lie, Elhokar's death is kind of overcome very quickly because the pivotal thing in that scene is the singers that Kaladin traveled with and the wall guard that he fought with killing each other.
Yes.
That's the thing. That's the emotional thing.
Yes. The pivotal emotional
like Elhokar's death.
It's
not important for Kaladin's arc even, so it's like...
It literally is not. Like,
it's
the
not
pivotal
important.
moment of this is the fact that Kaladin realizes, first of all, that he cannot stop these two parties from engaging in combat with each other, and second of all, he experiences the very horrible moment that is, oh no, I think both sides have a point. That is quite literally the big emotional impact of the scene. Yes, Elhokar dies, whoop-de-fucking-do. It's not important to Kaladin as a person.
Yes.
And it's not important to me as a reader, because I don't give a fuck.
Well, and also... Oh, go ahead, sir.
You go ahead first.
Okay. Yeah, so I think that what I really take issue with is that up until this point, it's really been pushing that Elokar is like one of the driving forces of Kaladin. Like, I need to protect him. I still need to have the magical, metaphorical white man be good somehow, despite the fact that we get him in other scenes talking to Sa, talking to the Parshmen, getting them saying the things that we've been yelling about since book 1, and just he can't let it go. And so I felt like, at least in that scene where he had the realization that everyone has a point, that maybe that's like the start of something, but I still don't think that it goes anywhere.
Yeah, and it's like those two things. I mean, first of all, in terms of his arc of not being able to protect everyone, having two groups that he cares about fight against each other are like way more like it's way more of like important or like impactful of not being able to protect anyone than just missing out on protecting one person, where he just like accidentally, because it's like, okay, you know, you can take different actions and then you could protect that person, but if you care about two different groups, obviously you can't protect both groups. And Kaladin, for me, still is one of the characters where, I'm sure, maybe once again I have rose-tinted glasses because he is, or he has been, my favorite character for a long time, in like literature generally, like period. But with Kaladin, Sanderson's inconsistent character writing really, really comes through, because he has all those situations, and him not coming to the natural conclusions from these situations feels so forced. It's like the only thing holding you back is literally Sanderson. It's
yeah, and what kills me about that is that after that scene, he falls into another bout of depression, right? Which is the most consistent thing about Kaladin's character that I just feel like he has written well, is that we see his depression for what it is, and he goes through it. But the way that it's kind of resolved is, again, him looking at Shallan and being like, oh, she's just so happy. How do you do it, Shallan? I got to learn from you. And it's like, no
one should learn from Shallan.
No one should learn from Shallan. Absolutely not.
You know, I do like the fact that at some point they talk to each other and Shallan is just like, yeah, like, I just pretend the bad things don't happen, which is a horrible coping mechanism. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, thank you. This was very important to say. And in all fairness, Kaladin only sees Shallan from the outside, and Shallan is fairly all right at pretending that she's doing good. So that's fine. That's okay. That is like one of the few moments that was actually very much needed in this book. But it does feel like he immediately kind of like just goes back to still thinking that Shallan is dealing well with things. I'm over here like, buddy, she spelled it out for you. She told you that she is delusional, like quite literally delusional. She pretends that things didn't impact her the way that they do. She compartmentalizes, there we go, to such a high degree that she herself looks herself in the mirror and goes like, hey, you're Delulu.
Yeah. Well, I feel like even with that, right, it's like he is going through the process of healing, and maybe hopefully with that coming to the conclusion that it's not helpful to compartmentalize the way that they are, but in the realization that there are multiple sides to this battle and that he can't just choose to save one of them, that he has different like avenues of sharing experiences or empathizing with different groups, that it still goes back to a place of it's just about him and his mental health journey, that it's not really about him being this person that kind of bridges the gap. And there are various scenes throughout the book where he has the potential and he says the right thing. Like when Jazin is like, yeah, genocide. And he actually says like, that's not a good idea. But then you can't have him be that person who says the thing that we want him to say, the moral thing. And then when someone of a different group stands up and says that he's wrong, he just brushes it off.
Yes.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because he's also always the one who's like, wait, so they're fighting for their home country? They're fighting for their home? we've been the invaders, and I'm sure you can talk about, it's been what, 5 millennia at this point, 4 millennia at this point,
at the very least, yeah.
And like that's the discussions with a lot of things. At what point can you call something your home? But there's still a difference between like saying, well, it's their home now as well, or like acknowledging the fault, the wrong things that they did, and like making amendments and restitution. But we're not even allowed to do that because there's this great excuse, and Dalinar always goes like, well, soldier, let's first survive, and then we will. I don't know.
And Dalinar
survive, and then we can
Adolin isn't.
Yeah, like, let's survive first, and then we can have a moral discussion about the fact that we have been subjugating the original people living on Rasha for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
And we're close to genociding them, which the only person who called that out, aka Kaladin, was then called a weakling. So that's another discussion.
And it's so weird because that's the last time we see Jasnah like talk about the singers, and she's like, let's genocide all of them. And then when the reveal is that humans are not native to Roshar and humans are actually the Voidbringers, Jasnah is suddenly like, well, I've been assuming that for a while now.
And you're just over here like, if you have been assuming this for a while, why the fuck were you the first one to argue for genocide, in favor of genocide immediately? What the fuck, man?
All the time. Like, every single time we've seen you talk about the singers so far in all of the books, it was like, they're the Voidbringers. They're the Voidbringers.
Yes. And I mean, there is a difference between an author trying to like purposefully lead people down a false path by like making a character who actually does know what they're talking about, like talk cryptic nonsense or whatever, that's a whole other thing that can happen. But like, I'm pretty sure that if we were to go back, which we won't because we're traumatized enough already as it is, but if you were to go back, I am 100% sure that every single thing that Jasnah said about the Voidbringers matches up so perfectly with everything she then also says about, as they call them, the Parshmen, that there is absolutely no way to come to a different conclusion, which in this case means Jasnah does not get to reap the like, well, I knew all along, or at least I suspected all along, which I guess is a little bit nicer than I knew all along, because in that case, what the fuck were you doing not telling people, Jasnah? What the hell is wrong with you? So, like, you don't get to reap the benefits of that when you yourself have been arguing so strongly against this the entire time to the point where no one was able to pick up anything else from you.
Yeah,
and
even if it's been a change within this book, a change of opinion, that still wasn't there on page. And it feels like the only reason Sanderson gives this line to Jasnah is because she needs to be the smartest always.
Yes.
Yeah. And I feel like he's shown us that he can write characters like that, right? That there's so many characters when it's anything related to the magic system, the Cosmere, like the greater Shadesmar, there's all these Spren and other characters who kind of drop these cryptic things. We even have things called the cryptics, right? They're like that drop these little nuggets of wisdom and we're like, oh, what's that? It kind of teases you at something that might be intentionally misleading, but we don't get to do that with the more serious plotline? Question mark.
Yes. And specifically with the thing that has been a moral issue from the very start to the point where multiple people, but including the one who was supposedly in the know about what these people actually were, called for a genocide. And again, to everyone who hasn't read these books, we are not exaggerating this. Yeah. Jasnah quite literally says that it would be better to exterminate a threat wholesale than to let some of these people alive. And she very directly looks at the as they call them, Parshmen, which they have kept as slaves, as we said, for longer than just a few centuries at this point. She is very direct in that threat.
And Shallan said the same thing in the second book. What did she say? Something about like, oh, we don't want to start a genocide on a Tuesday or something like that. Whatever. But like, okay, I think I'm gonna struggle to find the words to explain this, so please jump in and help me. But the point is like I feel like if someone's watching this and they've heard anything that we've said about the other books, they might think, oh, but isn't it a good thing that the humans are finally the Voidbringers and everything that you've kind of wanted to culminate to is actually kind of in a way eventually happening? But the issue here is that it's not, I don't have any trust in Sanderson to be able to handle this with the nuance that it deserves. I also feel like we are very much deep into him setting it up where it's going to be that we don't address any of the issues around restitution or how there's like holes in the religion or there's holes in the way that the society functions that we're glossing over. It's going to become, well, all sides need to work together, including the people who they contemplating committing genocide with, because we have bigger fish to fry. And to me, that should be secondary.
Yes. I mean, I think this is incredibly well alluded to on Brandon Sanderson's part, specifically by making Dalinar a bondsmith who is supposed to unite them all. Like, the entire theme of Dalinar's arc is he has to unite the people against a common enemy. That is it. And so you don't leave place for nuance if this is your big talking point, because there is a difference between people coming together against a common threat and people coming together under the force of, if you don't do that, you essentially have to be exterminated because you will join the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not good. That's not
also,
good.
like, even with the phrase "unite them," like, Dalinar never thinks about actually bringing the singers over to their side and uniting humans and singers against Odium.
Yes, there was one in my tabs. I actually did tab this
Jesus.
time. That's a lot. There is, I'm not even going to attempt to search in here for where it is, but there was one particular line where, and again, I'm not quoting it exactly because I don't remember exactly what it was, but I remember the intent behind it was Dalinar thinking to himself as he's reflecting about him finally recognizing, you know, maybe I was a shit person and maybe warmongering isn't the way that I should be doing things, right? But when he thinks about it, he feels guilt, but only when he starts listing all of the humans that he has wronged against, never the Parshmen.
Yes.
Why would you
look at that?
Feel like he did anything wrong? It's like absolute surprise.
No.
Also, if I remember correctly, Steph, you at the very beginning wanted to say something about romance.
Romance. Oh my god. Okay. So, where do I start?
Did we mention that this is going to be a hot mess? Here's the hot mess. It's us because we're hot anyway.
Yeah. So two things. I will like lay them out and you guys can decide which direction we go in. We have Evie and Dalinar.
Oh God.
Their highly abusive marriage. And then we also have this like love triangle, not love triangle, a love arrow, because it's Shallan in the middle and then there's Adolin and Kaladin. Like, why?
Maybe it's like a love
angle.
Is it truly
it's a
wrong?
love
Because
angle?
like it's not Shallan, right? It's like Vale.
Is it? Yes, it's Vale.
Oh,
okay,
God.
So it's like half Shallan, half Vale. Maybe it's like an acute angle, like something. I don't know. Which one do we want to start with?
I feel like maybe we should get the Shallan, Adolin, Kaladin situation out of the way first, because I do feel like with Dalinar and Evie, we have a lot.
Okay, well, being that, honestly, I think the first time I read this, I was like, what the fuck is that? And I didn't pay any attention to it. So, Sarah, since you finished, is there anything of consequence in the last 150 pages that I missed about this?
Well, there is the thing, like, at the end of Oathbringer, there's the, like, definite conclusion Shallan will not go for Adolin, and Kaladin says something. I'm gonna find it. I swear, I will.
We believe in you because we won't. We won't fight shit.
I don't know. Like, they get married. Yeah.
She marries
like
Adolin.
Adolin going to Shallan and being like, I will let go of you. I see how you two look at each other. And also, Kaladin can fly and I cannot.
Wait, who gets married?
Literally can fly.
I fully blacked out on that part. I do not remember.
That.
And then Shallan being like, Adolin, you stupid bitch. I like you. Yeah, sure. Vale thinks Kaladin is kind of cute, and maybe Radiant also kind of likes Kaladin. But you can't make this choice for me, and I choose you, or something. Whatever.
Yes. Okay, I remember that.
If he can't fly, then well, you just have to call it off. In terms of why she silliness. And it's like, to be honest, once again, can Shallan just go to, I don't know, a convent or somewhere, and Adolin and Kaladin fuck off and fuck
together?
I would be happy with that.
Like, maybe Adolin, the problem really is why you can't imagine Shallan liking you more than him isn't because you're insecure, but more so because you really want to fuck Kaladin anyway.
I would totally ship Kaladin x Adolin. And
yes. I'm sorry, that is the one queer relationship where I'm like, I see the queer coding.
Yes.
Shallan and Jasnah, Renarin and Ryan still haven't met, so you know. But
I do not remember the amount of. I genuinely do not understand how people could be like, oh my god, Relaine and Renarin was like so clear in the books, and me, professional shipping girl, was like, where though?
Where? Anyway, where was it?
It just
I love
okay.
And then after that, so the two of them go off and decide they're gonna get married or something.
Yay!
And Sylla is like, "Come on, Kaladin, you need to," because
when she tells him he can't be alone.
I don't like her. I don't like her.
I hate her so much.
She's so bad. Anyway, she's like, yeah, he squinted down at Shallan and Adolin and found that he couldn't be bitter. He didn't feel resignation either. Instead, he felt agreement. So realizing what everyone else has known all along, that Kaladin wasn't into Shallan. Like,
damn, who would have thunk it? Brother, we quite literally told you so, but all right.
Yeah. Odam still said, well, I know that you don't back down from fights. You've lost the round, but no, he said. Her choice is made. You can see. I can. You should be able to. I don't think I loved her still. I felt something, a lightening of my burden when I was near her. She reminds me of someone. Which is apparently Tien. So,
yeah, definitely see that. Hey, Josh.
I guess Kaladin has neither mommy nor daddy issues, but like brother issues or something.
It's so uncomfortable. It's so uncomfortable. I can't get over how these feelings started. I can't get over the chasm scene. I can't do it. And
it's also
here's the thing, right? You know, the thing I do understand, and the thing that I am on board with, as in, you know, these are the natural consequences of your fucking actions, are the fact that Shallan is into Kaladin. Okay, like that I can get behind to a certain degree. I don't like it necessarily, but I can get behind it. I can understand the reasoning there. But the other way around just does not compute whatsoever.
Yes.
Like every single scene that Shallan and Adolin, I want to say, Shallan and Kaladin share is essentially one where Shallan makes fun of Kaladin, with the exception of like maybe 2 to 3 scenes that don't start out that way. Like, I think the best conversation these two characters have had so far was in fucking Shadesmar, which happens in the last like 400 pages of the 3rd book. And they met in book 2. Wait, did they meet in book 1? No, 2.
2,
One,
I think.
2.
2.
Okay, great. Fantastic. My brain is not working. It's fine. So like this is the first conversation they have where Shallan very obviously tells him, hey, my coping mechanism should, by the way, so maybe don't copy it. Haha. So like this is the very first conversation I remember between these two characters that was very specifically almost heartwarming in its like carefulness between these two, where Kaladin himself is like, hey, I wanna start a conversation with Shallan, and Shallan does not immediately make fun of him, which is also a whole different thing that we talked about a lot in the live stream of book 2. A lot. So, like, I'm just over here, like, I don't understand why Kaladin would have any sort of feelings for Shallan. Yes, maybe some amount of adoration that is falsely placed, as he learns in book 3, you know? Like, maybe a little bit of, it is kind of interesting to see someone cope so well, which, again, she doesn't, but it's okay for him not to know that. That's fine. But, like, I don't understand why Brandon Sanderson tried to make it a point that there was anything romantic between the two of them.
Also, it doesn't make sense why she would remind him of Tien, because Tien was a genuinely good-hearted and light-hearted person.
Yes.
Shallan never is that. Not even her persona to the outside is that.
No. Yeah. And, like, that's okay. You know, it is fine that she is not that person, but it then also does not make sense that she reminds him of Tien.
What's important to me is that the same energy that Sa had when he confronted Kaladin and said, you don't know anything. You are not relatable to this. You think you're here to lead us, but you're actually like stepping on toes that you don't understand, right? And the way that he yelled at Kaladin, I want Kaladin to come at Shallan with that same energy.
Yes.
Like, you're talking down to me. You think you understand what I went through, but you don't know shit. And we don't get that at all. And to me, that's like a glaring hole here. Like, why does she get to relate to him? And why does he want so badly to think that the Light Eyes are people worth looking up to after everything that we've seen, after him being even privy to political conversations in the king's chambers about decisions that they make that horribly affect people around them? He still wants to cling on to this idea that she's great, but he can't like why can't he have both thoughts at the same time? That would, I think, make him flawed in a way that makes him more interesting.
Like, I think the biggest problem is not so much the fact that Shallan relates to him, but that he thinks he relates to Shallan in a way that makes his experiences inferior. That's the biggest problem we've had in book 2, and it carries over to book 3. That Kaladin looks at Shallan and is like, oh my god, she's experienced horrible things and she came out fine, so why can't I be fine? Among other things that happen between the two of them, which are like essentially in the same vein. And like, sure, there is this thing of like, you know, someone being mentally unwell looking at another person who seemingly copes well enough to be functional and go, oh my god, why can't I be like you? Why can't I cope with the things that are happening to me? So I'm not necessarily too fussed about that. I think that's completely fine. The problem is that every single time a scene like this happens, it has to be from Kaladin's POV, and Kaladin has to correct his view about Shallan and be like, hey, maybe she's not just basically like a white chick that I don't like. Maybe she's actually a human being with emotions that I should take care of. And this never happens the other way around, ever.
And also, not gonna lie, it would make sense if the same thing happened more so with Adolin.
Yes.
Because both of them, in a way, have their, like, are leaders. But Adolin has a very easy time, like, being on a level, even with people who he is socially superior to, and like talking to them on an eye level in a way where it's then also, at least in the interaction, reciprocated. I mean, obviously within the society and within the power structure, he won't necessarily be the same with them, but it's like this whole thing, he can go drinking with the dark-eyed soldiers and they accept him as one of their own within those types of social interactions, where Kaladin always struggles with Bridge 4, him feeling disconnected from Bridge 4 because they treat him with such awe, which he hates, right? So like, in terms of having a character that he wants to emulate, Adeline makes way more sense than Shallan. Yes. I'm sorry. What does Shallan have that you want to emulate? And it's just in general with Kaladin in this book, there's so much force. Like, there's so much forcing him into romance. And I remember, like, slightly there might be something in Rhythm of War as well in the future, possibly with, like, the one female member of Bridge 4. But, like, you have
no, not with her. I think there's also Leshwi, isn't there?
No. Is that who he starts the book off with, the girlfriend? Is that what happens?
I think, I think he
that might be.
Yeah,
that's what it was.
We're just like, where did that come from?
Really black that out.
Yeah, oh my god, yeah, it's coming back. It's like a year gap, or there's some sort of time gap. And when Rhythm of War kicks off, he has a girlfriend, and we're like, who the fuck is that?
I think, something. But like, even in this book already, because you have the whole interactions with him and his childhood girlfriend.
Oh god.
Woman, person. And then later on, there's this random flashback to some seamstress or something, armorer, whatever, girl who, when he's in Amaram's army, who tells him that he can't just fight for the people who are dead or something, or he has to live for himself. I don't know. She moves somewhere else, so he loses her, but she was like the first girl he kissed or whatever. It's so random.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that chapter was doing there.
And like, I mean, the thing is, I don't mind a character having, like, not great experiences in romance. That's completely fine. It's also completely fine for a character to be like, I think I'm in love, and then to realize, hey, maybe I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
But with Kaladin, it just feels so incredibly forced, especially in the whole Shallan Adeline situation.
Yeah.
It just makes no sense. It comes out of nowhere, and for some ungodly reason, we actually focus so much on it in comparison to all the other shit we could be thinking about. And I'm just over here like, it was not necessary for anything. It does not further the plot. It does not further the character relationships whatsoever. And you pick the two characters that make the least sense. If you had some balls, you'd make this about Adeline.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, what does Kaladin actually say about Shallan? She can smile with a lot of trauma. That's it. Like,
it's the trauma bonding.
She's pretty, I guess. Adeline, like, he's such a great guy. He's so amazing. Like, you're so mean to him. I really feel like I need to defend my homeboy here. Like,
it's such a like a just bros being bros kind of moment. And like, almost every single time Adeline and Kaladin are together on a page, I'm over here like, yeah, all right. It's okay. And again, you also don't have to go that route. Don't get me wrong. Kaladin can also just very easily not have a romantic relationship and romantic implications whatsoever. Or be someone who had a few in the past that didn't work out for one reason or another. And now he's just like, whatever. All of that is fine. What I'm just mad about is the fact that out of the two people that were so readily available, Brandon Sanderson picks the one that just does not work.
Yes. And especially, when Sylla says to him, I want you to be with somebody, you need to be with somebody, that whole thing that she says where we're just like, no, he doesn't need to. If he would have responded with something like, I've been through hardship, things didn't work out in the past, I just need to find myself.
Oh.
Beautiful. Yes, he doesn't need that. We don't know who Kaladin is without Kaladin being in the state of survival. He has no business being in a relationship right now.
Yeah, and it would have also been fine if, Sylla and Kaladin had some sort of like fun little banter about this every once in a while. The problem is that Brandon Sanderson does not know how to write banter without being incredibly mean, for lack of a better word, towards the person the banter is about.
All of Shallan's successful, all of Shallan's successful banter where she's like has these witty quips is her punching down on somebody, and I'm like, you bitch.
Yes.
Also,
the only funny person is Sabariel, and I will die on that hill.
Also, do you actually know who gets Kaladin out of his funk? in Shadesmar? Adeline.
Yes.
Like, we are literally not making this up. Every single time Adeline and Kaladin share a screen, it's essentially, for some reason or another, Adeline making Kaladin feel better. And not in the way of, oh my god, I wish I could cope as well as that person does, like it is with Shallan. No, Adeline is quite literally, he's the guy who get him out of this shit. Like, for real. He is, I think this is in book 4, so correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think there's this one scene specifically, I think it's book 4, because I don't remember it coming up so far, where Adeline basically looks at Kaladin and goes, can you be alone today? No? Okay, because if you can't be alone today without, like, hurting yourself or feeling incredibly sorry for yourself and then maybe relapsing into a horrible state of being, you're gonna come with me. There! It writes itself, but no!
How is it that Dalinar gets everybody into shit and everyone's praising him like, you're an amazing person, you should be king, and Adeline gets everybody out of shit and everyone's like, you're just a silly little boy?
For real though. But Adeline is being wronged here just as much as Moash is.
We haven't even touched on that. Okay, wait, we're still not done with romance though. No. Dalinar and Evie.
God. Okay, so it's bad. It's bad. Is
it ever... Okay, again, because I don't know if anything happened in the last 150 pages related to this, but I kind of doubt it, because from where I kind of left off, it was he was more worried about him spiraling back into drinking and then being there for his sons. But like, is there any kind of revelation of, you know what, maybe I was a shit fucking husband?
I think the only thing that still happens is the fact that Evie, for some reason, forgives him for everything.
Yeah. There's this thing where was it? I can find it.
Sarah's looking for the receipts. Let's go. That's always a good sign.
Like, so the last flashback chapter that we get is Dalinar going to the Nightbringer.
Mm-hmm.
The Nightbringer.
Don't look at me. I read the translation.
The span that gives the boon, and creation coming in and being like, no, you're not the one to give the boon. I am. And the thing that Dalinar asks for as his boon is forgiveness, which she obviously can't give him. So, where was it? I'm sure I can find it.
We believe in
you. But it was at the end where I stopped giving.
Stop tabbing.
Because I was like, I just want to finish this. I don't want to.
Understandable. Oh God.
So Evie,
I don't know. Anyway, it's like it's the whole thing where Dalinar is like, you can't have my pain because I don't know.
Oh yeah.
And then he hears a voice, and it's like, I forgive you.
Sarah, I feel like you should film like very sarcastic recap videos of these books. It would be great.
I'm sorry.
Okay. That was great.
To be fair, at some point I was like, maybe I should do like, yeah, there's the Nightbringer thing, where creation, it's like, I am doomed then. Dalinar whispered, stopping in place. He could still hear those voices. They weep, mother. I hear them when I close my eyes all around me, begging me to save them. They're driving me mad. Good. And then, yeah, I don't know. That's before. Tell me, can I ever be forgiven? So that's the flashback.
Okay.
And then we need to find the place where Dalinar actually confronts Odium.
Can only get worse from here on out, guys.
Is kind of hard because I can't find it. Yeah.
When he first confronts Odium, or when he confronts him again?
Colin stepped into the gap
the
in the broken wall, and there faced the nightmare alone. So this is we'll talk about the Skybreakers. I don't know why the Skybreakers are portrayed as the order that's like kind of the shittiest of them all. So yeah, anyway, Dalinar, yeah, Odium kind of confronts Dalinar with all his pain or whatever, and it's like, take a deep breath, my friend, Odium whispered. I'm afraid that this will hurt. No, Dalinar whispered. Voice ragged as the thrill.
Hold on, was that 2 times in a row? Was that 2 times in a row?
To be fair, one is like the last. One is the last sentence of the previous chapter, and the other one is the first sentence of the next.
Okay, never mind. I'll take it back.
So I don't know if that counts for anything.
No, it doesn't.
No, you're wrong. And then, like, Odium gripped Dalinar's shoulder. What does she say? She? He heard Evie crying, screaming, begging for her life as the flames took her. Yada yada, I was with you. Whatever. Then we have a lot of switching back and forth. Jasnah almost killing Renarin, which is very out of character for her that she doesn't, to be fair.
Truth.
So when does the thrill leave him?
Once he says, so Dalinar ripped his fingernails off. What the fuck? I think I read But the pain of the body couldn't distract him. It was nothing beside the agony of his soul, of knowing what he truly was.
So why do people still like him after this?
I don't know.
Because now he doesn't have fingernails. I don't know, maybe that improves his character.
Like, what about, even if up until this time we had the thrill, we had all these other things, he comes to a revelation, I'm a horrible human being. What is the justification for wanting him to succeed at this point?
I don't know, and I can't find where the whole forgiving thing is. But he says you cannot have the pain. The most important step a man can take is not the first one, is it? It's always the next one. Or whatever.
Right.
Okay, so at least up until that point, the thrill has always been with him, right?
I think there is an establishment that the thrill starts leading him throughout book 3, I think.
Okay.
Because at some point at the Shattered Plains, he starts feeling this disgust directly after, or sometimes even during the fight, which weakens him. That's a whole other thing we should unpack.
I found it, by the way. He's like, you cannot have my pain. I will take responsibility for what I have done. If I must fall, I will rise each time a better man. Odium stumbled back, yada yada.
Please stop rising, Dalinar. That would solve the issue.
Take a seat.
Yeah, several one, please.
A young Parsh woman, the one Dalinar had visited in the visions. What are you? She whispered. So that's Vanley. As he stood with arms outstretched, holding to the lands of mind and spirit, because he like kind of pulls the realms closer together or whatever. He closed his eyes, breathing out, listening to a sudden stillness, and within it a simple, quiet voice. A woman Sorry, that was very German. A woman's voice. A woman's voice so familiar to him. I forgive you.
Okay, so here's my thought.
So, I am unity.
Fuck out of here.
You're so great at that. With you always taking on diplomacy. Anyway, sorry.
So here's the thought. I think it's a bullshit excuse to absolve him of the way that he treated Evie. Yes. I think he was a completely different person with Navani, and none of that is justified by any of the other things that are happening in the background. He just chose to treat Navani better because of what she represented in his mind as the ideal woman. And even though, yes, they started off on like a rocky foot and it was an arranged marriage, whatever the case, Evie didn't wrong him. And he was so neglectful to her, not just in the sense of like, okay, fine, you don't have a lot of things in common and you're not really like even really interested in getting to know the mother of your children or whatever the case is. But like, even when she's giving birth, he's not there in support of her. Like, he's a horrible husband. And I feel like it tries to give him excuses, but I'm not buying any of the excuses.
I think the problem is also that we have Evie as a character give him absolution at the end of the day, because the only thing that Evie is there is to essentially, at the end of the day, clear Dalinar's slate, which is very funny because she is the first name on that list, right? But she gets to be the one to essentially look at Dalinar and I forgive you, which is fucking bullshit. Because even if Evie as a character, which we do learn she is incredibly soft and incredibly forgiving and incredibly trying to like keep the family together, if you could, say it like that, there's no keeping any of this shit together. But, she is in her essence described as this character who always cares and who always sees the best in people for some ungodly reason. And it just serves as this prop up, in this case specifically, to give Dalinar absolution of his crimes in the end of it. And it's so cheap. It is so cheap because Evie gets to have nothing of a character except for being a mother and for being a forgiving wife. That's it.
And also, she is the character who is incidentally, like, she's the one character that we know that he doesn't kill on purpose, right? I'm sure in battle, and like, it's not like he on purpose, and we know like he's established as a drunk, and in his drunken stupor he like hurts even soldiers of his and whatever. But Evie's death is like incidental. It's accidental. It's like it just happens, partially through her own fault. Because, like, at least how the narrative somewhat frames it also. Like, Dalinar, in a way, isn't to blame for Evie's death because she went to the rift. She went into the city. And through that, he just didn't ask where she was. He just assumed she was somewhere else. So, yeah, he blames himself for her death. But in a way, her death is like the least on the list for which he is to blame. And yet still she is the one who gets to give him forgiveness rather than any of the hundreds of peoples that he killed on purpose. And just like fully knowing what he was about. But they don't matter as much because that's just war or whatever.
Like, at the end of the day, Evie is quite literally the white figure that Dalinar gets to kind of like put all of his sins into, so he gets whitewashed in return as a moral character, not like skin color related in this particular case. And it's so aggravating to see that, especially because there are instances where Evie is then, for example, standing up for herself. Like, there's this one very famous scene where Evie tells him, like, I don't want to do all of this anymore. I want you to be a better man. I want you to be present for the family. And I want you to stop being in all these wars. I want you to stop fighting all these people so you can spend time with your actual family and give a fuck about us, essentially. Though she would never say it like that because, you know, she's
your younger son who's like a year old at this point, maybe older, who you haven't even seen yet.
Correct. And in that very particular scene, when she has all of these accusations that she, for the first time, has the courage to lay out, which, by the way, I'm not putting on her whatsoever. I fully understand not having the courage to stand up to fucking Dalinar, right? So, like, this is the very first instance where Evie really advocates for herself. And the way Dalinar shuts down that conversation is by saying, I'm a soldier. I know when I've lost a war, so I'm going to stop fighting. He doesn't have an argument against this because there's nothing to be said there. But instead of being like, hey, you're right, I'm sorry, or at the very least trying to very awkwardly then establish a connection between the two of them, he basically tells her, yeah, I've lost this conversation. So there's no sense in having this conversation anymore. You've won. Now you feel shitty about it, so now you know that in war there's no winners. Like, dude, this is your marriage we're talking about here, okay? This is not... First of all, it shouldn't be a war scene. Second of all, the emotional manipulation in that scene is so disgusting. Like, this is the very first time, truly, for anyone who hasn't read the book, this is the very first time that Evie tries to give him something. The first time that she's like, hey, I don't like this. The first time where she's, like, putting definitive points on the board and is like, I want you to fix this. I want you to try more with that. I want you to try more with our family and with our sons, plural, one of whom you don't even fucking remember the name of. That's a whole other thing as well.
And the only thing Dalinar does, like, thinks in response to this is, well, she chose a very stupid name.
Yes.
That name makes sense.
Yes, because, and this is another thing that adds to that, like, there's this thing in Alethi society where it's auspicious to name your children a name that is almost entirely symmetrical, which is a cool detail. You know, I don't mind the detail. I think the detail is fun. And there's also this thing of like trying to fit certain characters because apparently it's a character-based language, which we then also never establish anymore, which I personally think is sad. But anyway, there's this thing of like setting certain characters into something and then having the name mean something grand or whatever. Renarin, aka their second son, is named after traditions of Evie's birthland, which is not Alethkar. And to put that down immediately is a wonderful segue into Alethi's superiority complexes.
Like a mix, it's a mix of both, and Dalinar is like, so that means he who is born unto him, that makes no sense.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like when I was reading that, right? For me, it was just establishing that he is narcissistic, that he is abusive, the different levels of abuse that do not have to be physical abuse in order to be categorized as abuse. And if it would have taken all of this, and by the end of the book, Dalinar looks back and says, even though I have Navani by my side, who is this Alethi woman who is uniting everybody through her diplomacy or whatever the hell you want to call what she's doing, that Evie really was the one who sacrificed herself for the sake of unity, and reflecting on what she tried to do in giving him the messages that he needed to hear but wouldn't listen to, and kind of like using that as a means of saying, I was so reflecting on how wrong he was, and maybe even thinking, if I want to achieve unity, I'm going to do it in her honor, or like learn from her the things that I wouldn't have listened to in the past. But none of that happens.
No.
Yeah, and it's like, it's the whole thing also with like the reason what was it? The reason creation took the memories from Dalinar was so he could grow or whatever. I don't remember what exactly it was, but the whole thing doesn't work. And Dalinar as a redemption arc doesn't work because he's already Sanderson wants us to believe that he's already a fundamentally different person, or that we meet him as a fundamentally different person at the beginning of book one. And so we have two books of Dalinar being one type of person, and then his past is revealed. But his past being revealed, and even though you cannot have my pain reveal, is so incredibly unsatisfying, because throughout the past 3 books that we've seen, Dalinar hasn't changed. Dalinar has always been the person that he has been at the beginning of the Way of Kings. He has had setbacks, but he always stayed the same. He still doesn't like diplomacy for whatever reason, because diplomacy and politics is being not earnest or whatever. And people should just know that he's a good person, or I don't fucking know. And so the entire thing doesn't work, whether you like Dalinar or not. The Dalinar that we see in his past chapters doesn't fit with the Dalinar that we see in the current chapters, aside from being a narcissistic bitch. Like,
yes,
that's the consistent part. Aside from that, we don't see Dalinar as a blood-hungry person. Like, sure, we told he was that once upon a time, but even if you accepted at face value the whole "you cannot take my pain" thing, it's still incredibly unsatisfying, because like the character that is written is so obviously different from the character in the flashbacks that it's unnecessary. It's like
and I can't wrap my head around why any of this, why us learning about his past when, as you said, Sarah, he's been the same person that we've known since book 1, regardless of us learning about his past, why this makes him honorable enough for the Stormfather.
Yes. And the thing is also, because of the whole like memory deletion or whatever, I mean, first of all, it opens up the interesting discussion that we never get to have about how much of your memories make you as a person, as a character. Because the thing is, considering that I'm pretty sure those, like, at first it is established that he doesn't remember his wife, which, you know, whatever, dude, I suppose. But now in these flashback chapters of book 3, it feels like his wife was present in almost every single pivotal point of his life. So it bears the question, does he remember those pivotal moments? And if not, how much of the old Dalinar is actually in the new Dalinar? How can we have a redemption arc for a character who's not completely himself? Or is he completely himself, but we just neglected to, you know, include some of the most pivotal moments in his life? And in addition to that, it also questions how much of his war crimes he remembers. Because the most significant one would be to burn an entire city of civilians. And we don't know if he remembers that scene, or if he just forgot the part about also burning his wife in addition to that. And if he remembers everything that happened in the city except for his wife, that does imply that the only reason he feels bad is because it also happened to Evie. Which is a whole other thing we should unpack. But the second thing the whole memory deletion process does, and this is something that we have all struggled with respectively, including Josh, which is very sad because Josh is the only person we rely on when we don't know shit, which is all the time, by the way. What the fuck is the timeline? What the fuck is this timeline? And I swear to you, I feel like the memory deletion process is the thing that fucks the most with the timeline. Because Dalinar keeps going on like, I was so young and stupid back then. And then the latest flashback is like 9 years or something before present timeline. It's just like, back when, brother? Less than a decade ago.
When you were in your 40s, early 50s, my guy, like, you're an adult. Take some responsibility. But yeah, like
the sins of my youth. Yeah, you were like in your 30s, my
older,
guy.
I think he was older than that. Because I think in this timeline, how old is Dalinar in present day? Late 50s?
That's a very good question.
Maybe?
I think so. It might be. Like, you know, Rosharan years, but whatever.
Yeah, whatever.
And I'm pretty sure the first flashback happened.
I think Adolin is 21.
That's true.
So maybe like late 40s.
Yeah, around about.
Okay.
Like, I'm pretty sure the first flashback, because, like, the flashback scenes for Dalinar, thankfully, did have some years on top, which was kind of nice, because that was the only way I could keep track of anything. But I think the first flashback is, like, 22 years ago or something. Which is, like, very shortly before Adolin is born, because the very first flashback establishes Dalinar as not yet wedded to anyone, and just kind of, like, shows you this brash commander of armies who actually isn't even doing a lot of commanding. That's a whole other thing. Like, he's not even good as a general. He's basically just a killing machine.
Yes.
Which, great. Not really, but okay. Like, Adolin is quite literally shown to have more strategic understanding of anything than Dalinar ever is, which we did talk about previously, about how Adolin is completely undervalued by every single character, but it's very glaring because people keep talking about how the what's his name in English? Blackthorn?
Yeah.
Is that his? Thank God. Okay. They keep talking about how the Blackthorn is such a formidable warrior and general and whatnot. And I'm just over here like, if he were my general, I would kill myself immediately. Because he would do the same to me.
Well,
whether or not directly or indirectly. I'm not taking part in anything that Dalinar is cooking up, because whatever's cooking up there, I don't want any part of it.
Where is I going to go with this? I feel like in that same breath, since the beginning of this book, we have characters like Elokar and everyone else trying to make us think that he would make a better king, but we get no semblance of what it means to actually be a king in anything else but name.
Yeah. It does not compute. And again, it's this thing where, you know, I'm fine with a character being hypocritical. I am fine with Dalinar thinking higher about himself than anyone else would. I love books like that, in fact, okay? It's the one thing that you can really nail when you have different characters narrating different scenes. The problem is that throughout every single narrative, consistently, Dalinar is so desperately portrayed as the one man we all need. Like, there's this one scene where he falls into a depressive bout because he's finally remembered that he did, in fact, kill his wife. Oops, I suppose, you know, happens to the best of us or whatever. And he falls into this depressive bout, which happens right at the moment where all of the, like, different leaders from different countries try to come together for the very first time in person. And I think it's one of the first chapters we have that is legitimately from Navani's perspective, like the entire thing. Which would be interesting if it weren't her basically every 3 sentences going, oh my god, I need Dalinar for this. And I'm like, I thought we had established that this man does not have a diplomatic bone to his body. Why do you need him so much? In fact, it's better that he's not there, because at the very least he can't glower at people like he's about to skin them alive whenever they say something he doesn't like. It does not match up whatsoever.
It doesn't make sense.
So I was just looking through it. The rift was 11 years previous to the current timeline. So when Adolin was about 10, so Dalinar was probably mid-30s.
That sounds good enough, honestly.
Definitely not.
The thing is also, we have complained about this previously, but like it's like weirdly enough, because this is the one book where we do focus on Dalinar as a character, which might also be why all of us struggle so much, because none of us like Dalinar, as you might have noticed. Like, we were very subtle about it, you know, I'm just gonna spell it out right here. The problem is that Dalinar in present timeline feels so removed from past Dalinar, which, you know, fine, I guess, because of the memory thing or whatever. But like, if you take it into perspective, he lost his memories, he gave up his memories more or less around the time his brother got killed. It has not been that long. And for some ungodly reason, we just don't care. In the first 2 books of the series, we just do not care. And in the 3rd book, we just kind of pretend like all of that was so long ago in the past. And I'm like, dude, it's been like a decade. Okay. I have questions. You're not going to answer them, but I have questions.
The thing that I don't really get is which memories exactly were taken. Like, just the memories of his wife? But like, was then the memory of destroying the rift taken completely? Was it like changed so that his wife doesn't play a role in it? Like,
that's the entire point as well, and it also begs the question, you know, if the memory of the entire rift was taken, why would I root for the redemption arc of a character who does not even remember one of the most grievous war crimes he has committed, first and foremost? But second of all, if he does remember the rift, but he just doesn't remember the fact that he also flambéed his wife pretty good, why does he not care throughout the first 2 books?
yeah.
Because what that implies is the fact that Dalinar does not give a shit about the fact that he basically killed an entire city.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to root for a man who knows that he did that and who just does not care. But I also don't want to root for a man who just conveniently forgot about it.
But don't you know Sadeas should have known that his order wasn't earnest, that it was just posturing.
Yeah, so like obviously Sadeas is in the wrong here. At this point, I am so close to saying that Sadeas is the only, apart from Sabariel, again, you know, no one is on Sabariel's level, but like it feels like Sadeas is like the second best high prince that we ever see, which is the lowest fucking bar imaginable because I don't like him either.
I'm not close to it. I'm just straight up saying it. Like, I feel like that from book 1. You know, Sadeas at least stands to being an asshole.
That's true. That is true.
He doesn't pretend to say anything. He knows who he is. He knows what he's about. He's not even like Amaram, who's like, you know, I know that what I did to you was bad, Kaladin, but don't you see someone who's trained is better served? Like,
I
Amaram in his own way, but that's also something that like that should be more in the books. Amaram is one of the most honorable characters. Amaram is a more honorable character than Dalinar is.
Yeah.
So that actually,
Amaram doesn't have the type of honor that we generally would count as morality. Good morality.
Well, that actually leads into what I was going to say, which is like we get an allusion to that the Stormfather has been following Dalinar for a really long time and has kind of just been kind of waiting for him to come into himself honorably. And it's like, well, okay, so if the Stormfather is aware that Dalinar was committing all of these atrocities, does he forgive him? Like, why does he choose now to come out? Is it based on solely what Dalinar thinks about himself? Is it supposed to be this culmination of what everyone is starting to think of as honorable? Or like, what does everyone else think of? We know that they know that Dalinar is a warmonger, but no one else kind of brings up the fact that he did these things. So
there's going to be one character in book 4 that we are all going to look forward to who does it swiftly for like one scene. And that's it. He's the best character for that, but that's it. The thing is also, because it hasn't been that long, unfortunately, since I got to the Rift scene, but the thing that also gets me is while Dalinar is having his revelations of, hey, oh no, I killed my wife on extra hot, I suppose, whoopsie daisy. We do get like at least one conversation he has with the Stormfather where Dalinar himself is very explicitly like, why do you think I'm a good bondsmith then, or like a good candidate for a bondsmith? Because, you know, I killed all those people, which funnily enough I think is the very first time that he says that out loud, so that's a whole different thing. And I don't remember the exact words because 1, I am reading it in a translation, and 2, I just do not care enough for that. But the Stormfather very explicitly says something along the lines of like, yeah, like you gave them what you promised them, so that's a good thing. And I'm over here like, whoa, all right. This is us unpacking things that we should have spent a lot more time on unpacking. Because here's the thing, right? I am also fine with the honor spren and in, you know, connection to that, also the Stormfather being in the wrong here. Okay, I am fully fine with at some point of all of the characters realizing like, hey, maybe having spren for very intangible things like honor is a bad thing actually, because there should not be like one force TM that decides what is and is not moral, right? Or is honorable in this case specifically. First of all, I don't trust Sanderson to have that conversation. Second of all, I don't think he's going to have that conversation. And third of all, even if he is, the small snippets he has given us are not enough for that. Because if I have to think about this too hard on my own without you backing me up anywhere, we're going to need to have a very deep conversation about this at some point. Because what you just did in that one small scene, which is just one line of dialogue, is the Stormfather being like, yeah, you told them that you were gonna, you were gonna raise the city to the ground if they did something to you, and they did something to you, and you raised the city to the ground. So like you were honorable. And I'm like, oh,
That's not the same thing.
It's also a lot of times like Sanderson wants to have his cake and eat it too. Is that the saying?
Yeah,
I think that's the
saying.
It is.
So like you have the Stormfather who obviously only cares about oaths, but that's portrayed as something positive, not as something inherently neutral, I guess. Yes. Same with Sylla and Kaladin. You have those discussions between Sylla and Kaladin where it's like, okay, and Kaladin is like, so do you know what honor is? And Sylla is like, no. But at the same time, it's also portrayed as Sylla is, because Sylla doesn't think something isn't honorable, that's why it isn't honorable. It's never really a narrative that, okay, that's actually just a, like, perspective. Like,
yes.
That's why Amaram could be such an interesting character and such an interesting foil to Kaladin, because Amaram, again, acts incredibly honorable. He has a goal. He wants to save Roshar. And because he thinks Kaladin having shards ultimately will not be the best outcome for Roshar, he kills everyone. And he takes the shards for himself.
Yeah, it's about the bigger consequences of it. There is a scene, I think it's in the beginning of this book, where Kaladin is talking to Sylla, and I think it's when she first tries to, or it's not when she first tries to explain to him about the dead spren bodies in the shard blades or whatever, but I think it's alluding to the fact that they've had this conversation previously, because he gets exasperated with her. He basically says like, that's not important, I'm not thinking about that, and kind of like puts her down for her saying, you're using the dead body of my family members. So in that, when that happened, I was thinking to myself, well, that says a lot about what his code of honor is and about who it applies to, and it doesn't extend to her. But why is that not made into something more? It's this like picking and choosing, cherry picking of honor here, which just feels like it's limiting this story so much.
Yes. And which, here's the thing, right? Yes, Sarah, please.
On the point, I have the perfect passage that I think neither of you got to yet. So this is after they find out about the recreants and what the recreants was actually about. And it's Dalinar and the Stormfather talking, which I find it so weird. Is Dalinar the first person to bond the Stormfather? I don't think so, right?
I don't remember.
There was Bondsmith before, and there's only like 3 spren.
Yeah, there is only 3 specific spren that can make bondsmiths. So it should be implied that someone has bonded the Stormfather before.
Anyway, it's really interesting because, like, first it's like what we've discovered doesn't change the fact that we are being invaded, Dalinar said. Invaded by people trying to reclaim their homeland, Sixil said. Storms, I'd be mad too. We're supposed to be the good guys, Leighton said. Fighting for a good cause, for once in our storming lives. Echoes of his own thoughts. Dalinar found he couldn't formulate an argument against it. We'll see what Khal says, Teft replied. Sir, all respect, sir. But we'll see what he says. He knows the right of things, even when the rest of us don't. The bridgeman gave Dalinar the unique cross-armed salute, then left without waiting to be dismissed. In the past, Honor was able to guard against this, the Stormfather told him. He convinced the Radiants that they were righteous, even if this land hadn't originally been theirs. Who cares what your ancestors did when the enemy is trying to kill you right now? But in the days leading to the Recreants, Honor was dying. When the generation of knights learned the truth, Honor did not support them. He raved, speaking of the Dawn Shards, ancient weapons used to destroy the Tranquilin halls. Honor promised that Searchbinders would do the same to Roshar. Odium claimed the same thing. He can see the future, though only cloudily. Regardless, I understand now as I never did before. The ancient Radiants didn't abandon their oaths out of pettiness. They tried to protect the world. I blame them for their weakness, their broken oaths, but also I understand. You have cursed me, human, with this capacity. So, apparently, according to Honor, it was honorable for the humans to keep a hold of the land that they took.
And that's the part that confuses me. And I'm going to point to a comment that Josh dropped in the chat where it says, but he's also an Alethi army, so he needs to follow Alethi rules. So him stealing the shards are specifically not honorable in that culture, regardless of it being not honorable in general, right? So if just thinking about the quote that you just read us, honor seems to have its own established code of conduct before the Alethi are in power. And so now that they're in power, why is it that they're only following specifically the Alethi and not more in general humans and we get different variations of what impact that has when we start connecting it to the different societies who have all these varying opinions of each other because they don't want to work together. They have their own codes of conduct. So like, is it personal or is it grand? What is it?
I think that's also where, once again, you really see the holes in Sanderson's world building in terms of the Cosmere. Because within this story, like, we know as Cosmere readers, we know the shards aren't, like, they aren't these concepts, but they are like yes, they are concepts, but they have avatars, and how exactly they portray those concepts is also based on which avatar currently holds the specific shard. But within these stories, it's not established yet. So like, there being this thing of like, Honor said this, which, by the way, I forgot exactly why Honor was dying, how Odium managed that, whatever. I don't care anymore. But
it just happened. Like, you know, he dropped dead. Oops. Anyway.
Yeah. But, like, with this, Honor told the Knights Radiant that they were righteous in fighting against the Singers as they tried to...
church.
Is like... what the fuck? Especially as this is established as like honor is the uppermost, like it's not established as that honor is an arbitrary concept that changes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And like, here's the thing. Yes, thank you, Josh. This is entirely true. The thing is, I'm pretty sure I said this during our live show for the second book as well, but I just want to reiterate it because I just finished a book that dealt with this so much better. The thing that gets me about this entire, like, honorable situation and whatever, and the oath situation is, as Sarah said, oaths in their essence are a neutral force, you know, because you can make an oath that ultimately results in good things. You can make an oath that ultimately results in bad things. There's nothing inherently good or bad about an oath in general, or about keeping an oath in general. It matters whom exactly you then put that oath to. And there are so many different ways that authors can utilize oath-bound characters. I love to play paladins in D&D, okay? I know it's your thing about oath-bound characters, and there are so many different ways you can handle them, up to the point where you make it a good thing that they break an oath, for example, or where you make it a bad thing that they keep an oath. And there are so many books out there as well that treat this so differently. Like, for example, I just finished reading Goddess of the River by Vaishnavi Patel, which, by the way, was fantastic. And there is a character there who has a very rigid, like, oath-bound system where he's like, I swore an oath to serve this kingly family, so I have to keep that oath no matter what happens. And he realizes that he does wrong because of that. It's his whole character arc revolves around the fact that he keeps oaths and then realizes later on that maybe he shouldn't have. Because maybe he wasn't following the moral path, but the oath-bound path, which for him was easier because he had a manual, essentially, to read off of. And stuff like that is great, right? We're not saying that just because some oaths seem contradictory in nature or whatever, we're not necessarily saying that that means this is bad authorship, because more often than not, this can be a very interesting part about a character. The problem is that Brandon Sanderson does nothing with this, and in fact, if he does something with it, it either seems incredibly contradictory, or it implies that honor, manifestation of honor itself, is fine with the fact that thousands upon tens of thousands upon hundreds of thousands of original inhabitants of Roshar died for honor. Because they were slaughtered, and it was honorable to do so.
I want to add to that really quickly. If, for some reason, this is addressed the way that we want it to, in books 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I don't care. I'm going to be highly upset. And the reason for that is, one, it shouldn't take you that long, that many books to finally address, at least drop crumbs of reasons why I should believe that you are going to acknowledge that this is the issue, right? But like, the fact that when I talk to people and they're just like, Dalinar is great, these characters are good people, they're just trying to do the right thing, I'm like, where? Please tell me where. I have there's no reason to have faith.
The only person literally who, or maybe two people, Adolin, I genuinely think tries to do the right thing. Kaladin usually also does the right thing, just Sanderson refuses to make him take the last step. But the other people, like Kaladin, so often is like, hey, these people don't fight. And Dalinar is like, well, not my problem, because in wars, the little people always lose.
Yay!
Ooh.
Not like
Amazing.
he directly controls the path of the war to a certain extent and could stop the little people from losing.
Yeah,
So
it's
responding to Josh's comment, the vessel of honor is a human, so it's probably part of honor's human centerism. Why can't we have multiple Spren in different bodies?
Yes.
honor is not a Spren.
I'm sorry. Why can't, either way, like, why can't we have honor be in a singer body or whatever the case may be? Like, why can't it manifest in different places?
It's just the thing that we're also struggling with. I'm trying to put this into word as succinctly as possible. The thing that we're struggling with is the fact that due to the way the world building works, specifically in the Stormlight Archive, it is implied that there is an honorable way to do things and a dishonorable way to do things. And the problem is that this rigid system does not translate. And it especially does not work in this case where we have now learned that humanity isn't even the original inhabitants of Roshar, because it means that honor has been used to justify the slaughter of thousands of hundreds of thousands of innocents.
Yeah,
and the
like,
book never goes anywhere with that.
the thing is, it's almost like Sanderson chose the wrong genre, right?
Yes.
Because the Stormlight Archive is heroic fantasy. And
Yes.
heroic fantasy very much is, there's the good people and there's the bad people. It's a lot less like nuanced than other types of fantasy. It's like, it's almost as strict as Grimdark, I would say. In Grimdark, a lot of times, because Grimdark isn't necessarily like everyone is a shit person, Grimdark a lot of times is also, there's good people and there's bad people, but the bad people will always win. Like,
yes.
that
As its essence, that is grimdark fantasy. Grimdark fantasy is not about the fact that everyone is a shitty person.
Heroic fantasy is, there's good people, there's bad people, but the good people will always win. It's like the other side of the coin of Grimdark, right? And so, even if Sanderson tries to bring nuance into what is honor, like, how can we see honor? Is there different perspectives? Which he sometimes, like, in, like, just a little bit, it's like tangentially touching on with Kaladin and Syl's discussion. It does not work within the heroic fantasy genre,
Yes.
which I don't mind. I love heroic fantasy sometimes. However, at the same time, Sanderson has characters that very specifically are, like, make non-heroic actions, and has situations that just are more complex than here's the heroic side and here's the non-heroic side. And so, like, the contents of the plot almost need a different genre than Sanderson gives it, and that's where a lot of the problems come from ultimately. Because
Absolutely.
with the heroic fantasy genre, a lot of times you can have very nuanced characters, but it's kind of hard to have, like, nuanced social and political situations.
Yes. And I think the biggest fault line, apart from the whole honor concept, is in fact Dalinar. Because Brandon Sanderson is trying to build him up as this character who, at least to a certain degree, learns the meaning of honor and applies the meaning of honor in real life, which he never does, by the way. You know, I'll just add that. He never does. So he wants Dalinar to be a person that people root for. He really does. And we've said this multiple times. It shines through every single character who interacts with Dalinar in one way or another. And the problem is, a character like Dalinar's works in heroic fantasy, but not in the fashion that Brandon Sanderson is writing him, because he is, to a certain extent, trying to establish Dalinar as this complex character who's had a very sad and horrific past that he somehow has to work through in order to earn his redemption, which he never does, because Brandon Sanderson does not allow him to do that, because he wants Dalinar to both be a flawed individual and a hero. And at least in the genre category that he has chosen, this is not a combination that can work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't.
By the way, that's also what I wanted to say. Like, you know, it could be, but, like, it doesn't work with the length of the series. It could be an interesting concept of, like, having this 2-arc series, and the first arc is one direction and the other arc is like, okay, so we'll switch it around. Actually,
yes,
it's about the singer's struggle now.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work if you have 5 whole books with, like, 5,200 pages. 1,200 pages. There's, like, 6,000 total pages.
At the very least,
more than
yes.
most series get it in total. This is that's a type of concept, which, by the way, I don't think Sanderson will do that. But that's a type of concept that works if you have a duology, for example, or a trilogy.
Yes.
And you have one book where you follow one set of characters, and then in the second book you realize, well, actually those were the villains or whatever.
Yes. That does in fact work, but again, first of all, as we've already established, we don't trust Sanderson to do that, period. And second of all, like, I need everyone to understand who hasn't read these books. They are fucking massive. Like, they are genuinely the longest books that I have consecutively read in a row for a series. Not even Wheel of Time has so many long books directly after one another. Okay? And Wheel of Time is established as one of the longest Western fantasy series of all times. So far. But Stormlight Archive is already getting closer to how long Wheel of Time is with just the first arc of 2 arcs that are both probably going to be roundish about the same page count. And Knights of Wind and Truth, which is the 5th book that's coming out, is rumored to be the longest one in the series yet.
Don't remind me.
Okay.
I'm
So,
sorry.
all that to say, hot take, longer doesn't mean better.
No.
Yes.
I also have many hot takes about Wheel of Time not having to be this long, but that's a different thing.
Okay, so in order to give some clarity as to why it is we feel that we don't trust him, if in case it's not clear from anything that we've already said, can we talk about Moash?
Yes.
Yes. Question though, do we want the colonialism stuff first or after? Because I have one last thing about someone crawling up Dalina's ass.
Okay, go.
You know what? Yes, let's connect the
which has
Dalina
to do
issue
with
first.
Skybreakers.
Ooh.
Which is the order that's like to the letter of the law. And with them, actually, very interestingly, it is established already that the letter of the law is different everywhere else. So like Skybreakers until like the 4th ideal or 5th ideal, I think, they follow the letter of the law anywhere where they are. And then the last ideal is that they become law unto themselves. So they basically become law themselves. And it's like, I think it's the 5th ideal, because I don't remember what the 1st and 2nd was. Then the 3rd is to like look for a law, type of law that you follow. The 4th is to have your own quest. And then the 5th is to become law unto yourself. And so we're talking with Nin, who is like the herald of the Skybreakers. And it's like, you must choose, Seth, son Naturo, Nin said. The Skybreakers will swear to the Dawn Singers and their law. And will you join us? So Nin, the herald, basically decided that since the Dawn Singers are the original people of Roshar, it is right that their laws be followed. So they will fight for the Dawn Singers. Wind rippled Seth's clothing. All those years ago, he'd been correct. The Voidbringers had returned. Now he was to simply accept the rule. I don't trust myself, Aboshi, Seth whispered. I cannot see the right any longer. My own decisions are not trustworthy. Yes, Nin said, nodding, hands clasped behind his back. Our minds are fallible. This is why we must pick something external to follow. Only in strict adherence to a code can we approximate justice. Aboshi, Seth said, when I say the 3rd ideal, can I choose a person as the thing I obey instead of the law? Yes, some of the Skybreakers have chosen to follow me, and I suspect it will make the transition to obeying the Dawn Singers easier for them. I would not suggest it. I feel that I am getting worse. You followed men before. They caused you pain, Seth, son Naturo. Your agony is because you did not follow something unchanging and pure. You picked man instead of an ideal. Or, Seth said, perhaps I was simply forced to follow the wrong man. And then he chooses Salazar to follow as an external force.
Pain.
Oh God, we had such a good line of thinking there. We had such a good and interesting line of thinking there, where even the Skybreakers, who are sometimes upheld to be the heralds of law, essentially, basically claim that the only thing they can do is pick something to follow, and then they have to live with the consequences of their actions, whether or not they be righteous. You know, we had a good thing.
And the herald of the Skybringers being like, hey, these were the original people of the land. Yes. The closest thing I will come to justice in this land is following them.
And the funniest thing about this as well, for people who haven't read the series, is the entire point is that the heralds have been imprisoned for centuries in this like weird ass dimension where they were basically tortured to death and then only released upon the earth back again when one of them folded and was like, I give up, I don't want to be tortured anymore, which is also why all of them are veritably insane, which I fully understand. So like, they were tortured more likely, if I understand everything correctly, by the fused. Yes?
Yes.
Or forces similar to that, at least.
I don't.
This man.
The fused, so like because the fused are the ones who hold like the old souls of the original Dawn Singers, I believe.
Yes. Yes.
So, that's where they were.
Yes. So these are the ones where every time they die, they just kind of originate back to where they were supposed to be contained, and they're not being contained.
But like, you know, even if we argue that the heralds were being continuously tortured and does not have physical bodies as is, they fought. The heralds consistently fought against people that looked like the Dawn Singers. So if the Herald of Law is like, hey, maybe we shouldn't have done that, and we're now going to follow the original people who inhabited this land. Maybe someone should listen to that.
And like, that's the thing, once again, where we don't really have a problem with these things happening, but more so with how Sanderson then encases it in narrative, because we can't have the Skybreakers be like, okay, the original, we're gonna follow that right now, and have like the reader decide if that's a good thing or not. No, Sanderson has to have Nin add, actually, I'm getting worse right now and my judgment is getting worse, so I don't even know if that's the right decision. Or we can have Seth follow Dalinar, but like, it's not framed as something that might be a bad decision for Seth, or like, you know, left open as to how it's gonna end. Narratively, this is a good thing right now.
Yes. And the thing is also, as Josh pointed out in the chat right now, Nin or Nail, however you want to actually call him, which, you know, not an issue that they have approximately 50 names to themselves. I don't really mind that. He is not necessarily a quote-unquote good person in the sense of, like, he has not killed anyone, because he very specifically started the plot of trying to kill new Radiants so the recreation wouldn't come. So, like, he has a somewhat skewed sense of maybe not necessarily justice, to a certain degree, probably that, but he has a very skewed sense of how to not make certain things happen, which I don't mind, because I love characters like that, especially if they also get to be psychologically tortured as a treat. That's fantastic. I love it. However, the problem is, first of all, this does not fit, again, fully in the genre that Brandon Sanderson is going for, and second of all, Nail still gets to be the only person, more or less, who outright says, I'm going to stand with the Dawn Singers because I think they're right. And to make the only character who is established to not be the quote-unquote good person that we might need, to make this character be the only character who outright says, I'm going to be on the side of the Dawn Singers, I'm going to pledge myself to their case, is not a good look. Mm-hmm. Genuinely not a good look.
Just side note though, for some reason, I don't know if there's any basis in the books or not, but whenever I was like, I'm thinking of Damnations and the Heralds getting tortured, I always have the image of like Dean in Supernatural after I don't know which season, when he's in hell, he has like all the hooks in him. And that's like, I don't know why, but
no, I get you.
That sounds like a close approximation. It's pretty good.
Oh God, you're so right. I think that's what I've been envisioning this entire time. Oh God,
just
Fandom
like a red void with like hooks and stuff coming from everywhere.
Yes. Oh my God. Oh God, Supernatural. That was a time.
Josh coming with the info. It was season 3.
That's great.
See, Josh, this is why we need you, because even when this is not about Stormlight Archive, you remember shit that we don't. Oh man.
For those who
all right,
don't
you know
what?
I
think in the last live show, Josh is in the Discord with us, and whenever we need info on anything that does not pertain to time periods, like how long it's been, like, hey, please.
You know, Josh, that is the perfect encapsulation of the entire thing. If it's about a shitty story that I care too much about, I know. I feel that.
Okay. In that same vein, I'm going to go back to a previous comment where Josh was answering one of my questions, right? And I'm going to relate this to a thought that I'm having, where Josh said, like, yeah, it's not important in the Stormlight convo, but Cosmere in general, to answer your question about why is Honor Vessel a human, it's because Tanavas the Vessel is one of the 17-ish people who are killing ad nauseum and splitting his power into 16. And it's like, see, these are the kinds of nuggets of Cosmere information that my brain is not retaining, because I feel so very much like Sanderson is just spending so much time building in this magic system that he has clearly, like, I don't know what his notes, his wall of connecting thoughts must look like. I'm sure it's very impressive as to how he has built this magic system and made everything work, but none of it is related to any of the stuff that I care about. And so I will never remember this. So thank you, Josh, for bringing it to the forefront of my...
I do also think this is information. I do not remember this being addressed in Stormlight necessarily. I also don't fully remember if it was ever fully addressed that 16 people killed Adonasium, apart from...
I think at most, in the most recent Mistborn.
Okay, that's fair. I did not read that one. And I have no intention of ever doing so.
But we should get back to Moash.
Yes, because the whole thing of like the worst person being on the side of the singers is also very consistent with Moash here.
It's so offensive.
Okay,
although is he the worst person, actually?
No, he's not, but he's portrayed as one of the worst people to exist.
He's the villain of Oathbringer.
Yeah, it's like, and it's so weird because when we see Moash, when we're like back with Moash in this book, he's like traveling with Graves. He's very much depressed. Has so far refused to remove his patch of the Bridge 4 from his uniform. He says it's because it's still cold. Like, he removes the patch, but he says he didn't get rid of the jacket because it's cold. And then they're attacked by singers. Everyone is killed except for Moash, who kills one of the fused and is then taken. And the main thing he's thinking about and he's talking about is how he portrayed Kaladin.
Yes! Oh my god!
That's the only thing that's on his mind.
It's so infuriating.
That's on his mind. It's the only thing. It's the reason why when he's done with the singers, he offers himself up for the worst job. He's like, this is something I can do. I don't really deserve a good life anyway. Let me do this. He meets the same group of people that Kaladin met earlier. And he helps them. This puts him up narratively as a parallel to Kaladin.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he starts as a narrative foil to Kaladin. Like, very, very obviously. Then he
basically starts his Bridge 4 with the singers.
Then he meets and the group of singers that Kaladin left, and that he kind of left alone, and because they trusted Kaladin, they are now in a really shit position with the other singers.
By the way, I just wanna I don't remember if any of you remember enough about that, so maybe this is a question for Josh specifically. But did those singers ever trust Kaladin?
Yeah.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Did they?
I kind of like always just read it as they don't kill him, but that's about it.
I remember them being resentful and angry at him because they were like, well, okay, we'll have to get back to this, but like the reason being that they going back to them not knowing and having skills and him needing to come in and save them, when it's like, why can't they be at least some level of self-sufficient, especially because they were the labor force.
The problem is that like the time passing isn't really clear. So like in one chapter they're still very like resentful of Kaladin, and in the next chapter we see them they have let him free. He roams, he talks to humans so they get shelter and stuff. And he shows them how to survive in the wilderness. He shows them how to make oat cakes and etc. So it's not like they have a close relationship or anything, I think, but they are amicable.
Okay, fair enough.
But because they harbored a human amongst them who was not prisoner and imprisoned or in chains or whatever, that's why they are in a shitty position with the other singers.
What pains me so much about this is that Moash's motivation for his depression just feels so misplaced and like such a lost opportunity.
Yes.
He is so busy being a character that is used to frame Kaladin as morally upright, rather than let him feel righteousness and let him feel anger and make this about what it really should be about, which is not specifically that he needs to kill Elhokar, but that the whole system needs to be go in upheaval, right? That he needs to start this revolution and this anarchy. But we can't do that because we need Dalinar and everyone else to be the end on the moral high ground, right? There's even the scene where it's like some fused are whipping the human slaves or whipping some other, maybe, I don't know if it was other humans or other Parshmen or whatever the case was, but that they were also mistreating them similarly to how slavery works in Alethi society. And we could do so much more with that, but it just kind of ends with the thought of, well, everybody's an asshole.
Yes. Yeah, it's like, so first of all, I don't like how Moash is talked about. Like there's this passage, he'd always been met with hostility, no matter where his storming went. A youth like him, too big and obviously too confident for a dark eyes, had been considered a threat. He'd joined the caravans to give himself something productive to do, encouraged by his grandparents. They'd been murdered for their kindly ways, and Moash, he'd spent his life putting up with with looks like that. So like, Moash is, more so than a lot of other characters, coded very black, I would say. Just because of how he looks like and how he acts, he is perceived as a threat by others. And like, he mostly, and then it's like, nobody would ever let him in except Bridge 4. So like, his whole, like, every single thought that he has to himself is regret for betraying Kaladin. He's a lot of, it is like, it's my fault, I'm a bad person, that's why I betrayed him, whatever, yada, yada, yada. And then a few chapters later, when we see him again, he meets with Lashwi, the fused that he killed at the beginning, and who returned. And it's like, if you were not killed for striking down one of the fused, she said, then why would you be killed for striking one of our lessers? Which now, like, Moash is so much more set up as a protector of, like, he's right now being set up as a protector of the ones who can't protect themselves, with the group that Kaladin traveled with earlier.
Yes.
In both cases, human, you proved your passion earned your right to succeed. Then you bowed to authority when presented and earned your right to continue to live. Tell me, why did you protect those slaves? Because you need to be unified, Moash said. He swallowed. My people don't deserve this land. We're broken, ruined, incapable, which is where the resentment for the first time comes back in again that Moash has for Light Eyes. And are you not angered that we took your shards? They were first given to me by a man I betrayed. I don't deserve them. And then Odium talks to him, so we get, I assume that the stuff in cursive is Odium talking to him. No, not you, it's not your fault. You aren't angry that we conquered you? No. Then what does anger you? What is your passionate fury? Moash, the man with an ancient singer's name. Yes, it was there, still burning, deep down. Storm it. Kaladin had been protecting a murderer. Vengeance, he whispered. So, like, it's, like, he has not once thought about the failing of killing Elhokar since this book started. We're somehow supposed to believe that the thing that still moves him the most is killing Elhokar and vengeance.
Yes, somehow.
It also just flattens the entire thing that Moash has about wanting to be treated better, about resenting Light Eyes for the way that their society works. It flattens everything into, I just want to get rid of the man who killed my grandparents. That is all that we're doing with the character that he represents, and it infuriates me to no end, because there's also this part where he is with the fused and the freed singers who have been taking humans as slaves, which, again, there's a whole discussion we could have about how the fused and singers are presented specifically that is incredibly infuriating, because it just plays into this fear that white people in this world have about disenfranchised societies just striking back at them when they have the power to finally do so, and it infuriates me to no end. But that aside, there's also this one moment where Moash starts talking to some of the human slaves because they find out that he is a deserter, so he is a soldier, and he does have some amount of training, which he mostly got under Kaladin. And they kind of like try to recruit him for them, and he comes into their society that they have built as the slaves of these fused and singers. And he realizes that even under the threat of an enemy that right now has more power than they do, Light Eyes are still the same. This is the biggest revelation that we've had so far, where a character is like, just because there is a common threat does not mean that the societal structure changes in any significant way. In fact, it might even be worse, because now the Dark Eyes are both mistreated by the Fused and by Light Eyes, even though all humans in this camp are currently slaves. And this moment is so impactful. And it could be so impactful for the whole series, but then we just ignore it.
Well,
and it drives me crazy.
So I think this is an opportunity for me to say something that I've been wanting to say for a long time. That Sanderson is very good at writing mental health issues, depression, oppression, guilt, he's very good at writing those things solely from a white perspective. He is not good at writing them from any other perspective, because time and time we've seen, again, as we've all said, that when it comes to these complex emotions and characters, he does them in depth and on multiple pages. I'm just going to even say like more than a paragraph, with characters who we consistently see on a moral high ground, like Kaladin, like Shallan, like Dalinar, and then other characters which are coded to be of different marginalized groups. The conversation falls extremely flat. So I don't know if that just means he needs to get better editors, he needs to get more sensitivity readers, he needs to take an ethics course, he needs to take some sort of like DEI training. I don't know what he needs to do, but he needs to do better research, because that is the main reason why I do not trust him.
Yes, 100%. 100% that. And the thing that also gets me is, again, with flattening Moash's characters to this degree, he's just genuinely losing the ability, the possibility, really, of having a marginalized character who is not Kaladin finally have a say in something that is then accredited to him actually having a point. But instead, what we do is we let Moash introduce the point, and then all of a sudden he's just a man who wants vengeance. And then all of a sudden he is the guy who, unfortunately cuts Elhokar's life short right before he could become a Radiant, which of course is framed as a bad thing. Why do we have to go this route?
And then returning again, like Moash also, like, even narratively as a character does not work, because, as I said, he's very obviously set up as a character foil to Kaladin. He is the opposition to Kaladin. However, by the end of Oathbringer, he suddenly somehow is the opposition to Dalinar.
Yes!
Because you have this thing where Odium has been speaking constantly for a long time to both Moash and Dalinar. And while Dalinar refuses to give up responsibility for his actions or whatever, Moash does do so.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's so frustrating, but then at the same time, you have to have a scene at the end with Moash where Moash is like, actually, he doesn't feel better after killing Elhokar. Whereas Kaladin didn't get to kill Amaram. There wasn't even, though, and that's like kind of frustrating, there wasn't even a situation of Kaladin consciously deciding against killing Amaram. It was just that he had like literally every single bone in his body broken,
Mhm.
and he was just lying there. So it's like
he was physically unable to do it,
Yeah.
so he also couldn't physically try to do it. So there's no like active refusal on his part.
Yeah.
It's just he couldn't crawl far enough
but
to do
it's
it.
a good thing because like the literally the chapter after we get Moash being like, well, vengeance was useless anyway, and then he gives up his feelings or whatever, everything, and
Yeah,
he becomes
Moash, you know why that might be the case? Because your point was never fucking vengeance in the first place.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's so frustrating. Because, you know, I do not want to present Moash as the best person ever, because he does have his flaws. He very much does have his flaws, which does make him a compelling character to follow. The problem is that despite everything that he consistently tries to bring up and talk about, he has to be reduced to this incredibly, almost one-dimensional caricature of a character who does never get to be even remotely considered as something other than that. And it is beyond infuriating.
He literally is just the character that does whatever Sanderson needs him to do to show how good the other characters are.
Yes. Yes. And like I haven't gotten in my reread to that part yet, because again, I gave up. Both spiritually and actually, so you know, there's that. But isn't like one of the defining moments as to why Moash gives up his feeling in the end because he doesn't want to face what he did to Kaladin?
To be honest, it didn't feel that much like a conscious decision. Not gonna
yeah, like
lie.
I mean, apart from the fact that it doesn't feel like a conscious decision, but I feel like I can't talk anymore. Anyway, I do feel like to a certain degree, a lot of what Moash does or doesn't do, or at least what he thinks about, is just framed consistently around Kaladin, to the point where I'm over here like, dude, Kaladin had nothing to do with your decisions whatsoever. And I find it quite insulting that you look at what happened in that scene where you killed Elhokar, and you essentially tell me to my face that the reason you feel bad is because Kaladin felt bad. Like, what? Why?
He's like, he kills Viserion. So I have not passion, just numbness. You have given him your pain. He will return it human when you need it. So like we don't even get the scene or situation where he actively gives up his pain. We like didn't see him for ages since they left Kholinar. So yeah. Maybe he gave up his pain early and I just read over it, to be honest. Could be. And then I don't know. He's just like
While you're looking for that, I'm reading the comment also to the question of why the singers that harbored Cow were punished, is to show that the evil Sprime will still oppress people for bad reasons. So again, not good.
Yeah. And that is exactly what's happening.
Yeah, so it's you have given him your pain. That would be fine so long as he could forget the look of betrayal he'd seen in Kaladin's eyes.
There you go.
Yeah.
There you go. Like, the thing is, you know, I don't necessarily, as a whole, mind if a character is more impacted by something another character does or think about them at the end of the day, right? Like, I personally think that can lead to some very interesting interpersonal friction and stuff like that. But first of all, it adds nothing to this. And second of all, as I said, Moash is one of the few people who does give contra to the way specifically Alethi society works. Okay, he's one of the few consistent people, not looking at Kaladin here, one of the consistent people who consistently goes, this is bullshit, and I hate it, and I hate how they treat me, and I hate how they look down on me. He has some of the most impactful epiphanies, even in book 3, where he is treated like shit by the narrative. Like that one scene, as I said, where he realizes that light eyes will always be light eyes, even when they are quite literally enslaved, is a fantastic scene if we did something with it. But at the end of the day, one of the key reasons he actually goes over to Odium's side, aka gives up his feelings and lets himself be blanketed in just feeling nothing, is Kaladin. one person. And I am so sick and tired of it because it flattens him as a character so much, and it is so exhausting to look at this, because at the end of the day, what this does is it suggests to people that Moash blames all of his faults and defaults and whatnot on Kaladin to a certain degree, or at the very least he blames himself for not measuring up to the man Kaladin would want him to be.
And
I guess
thing is, at least with the singers, he quite often is that man.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I guess in some way it's supposed to be a kind of parallel to, I forgot what's his name, who devotes himself to Dalinar in the end or whatever. But like, of that it can go both ways, in ways that are considered honorable and unhonorable to devote yourself to somebody. I don't know, but that's if memory serves correctly, in Rhythm of War, all of these things start to fall off because we get wrapped up so much in like the Cosmere related stuff.
Yeah. It's just it's such a whole mess, and the thing it just bothers me so much because Moash is consistently one of the most hated characters in the fandom, like hands down. I'm pretty sure I see more people hate against Moash than they do against literal genociders among Dalinar, for example, you know, to just name one.
Reason for that, the excuse is like the reason is always it's because he killed Elhokar. Because for some reason Elhokar is a fan favorite, which I don't get.
I do not understand it either. And because he tried to convince Kaladin to commit suicide in book 4. Spoiler alert. Oops. Anyway, like those are two very consistent things I hear about when people talk about why they dislike Moash, and I'm over here like, listen, I understand that some parts of his character might hit very hard, especially because I know that a lot of people who really like Kaladin as a character relate to his depressive episodes, and so feel very, very horrible about the fact that Moash does essentially tell him to kill himself, because it will make everything feel a lot better. Which, by the way, also heavily implies that Moash is incredibly suicidal in book 4. I'm just, you know, but we don't have to care about the mental health of a person who is incredibly black-coded, right? We don't have to do that.
That's the key reason why I believe there is so much Moash hate in the fandom, is because of the fact that he is coded as someone who is experiencing things that the oppressors, or that the people with power or privilege in the situation, the people with situations that are more generally relatable to everyone, but more specifically to white audiences, it's because he's less accessible to the fandom for that reason, because they're not relating or making the connection of that, the fact that he is a part of the larger metaphor for racism and colonialism in the Cosmere.
Definitely. And again, also the fact that Brandon Sanderson himself does not allow for Moash to be a fully fledged out character.
And because it's really noticeable he doesn't like Moash.
Yes. Like, again, you know, as someone who also writes her own stories, I fully understand that sometimes as a writer, you look at one character and you go, you're a piece of shit and I don't like you. I created you myself and I despise you. That's okay. That's fine. But I feel like in this specific case, it's just so incredibly obvious that he needs Moash to be all the bad things that, you know, he possibly could fit into the story. And it just serves to flatten Moash's character even further, and it's incredibly exhausting to witness.
I feel like it's important to note that a character does not need to be accessible or one that we can necessarily empathize with for them to be complex and for them to have reason for us to want to see them be more fleshed out or succeed
100%.
Or not succeed, whatever the case is. Like, this liking certain characters is not a reflection of yourself.
God, if we could only get there. This is a consistent problem in fandom culture right now, and it is incredibly exhausting too. It's just, it's a whole mess. Also, can we like very briefly talk about this? I mean, this might just be my delusion, but at the end of the day, considering that with the whole, Moash taking care of the singers who are now abused by the fused because we possibly cannot have, dynamics that directly mirror the oppressor, not present in the oppressed when we finally get to have parts of their perspective. But all right. It's just... It's such a mess. I hate everything about it. But can we talk about the fact that to a certain degree, Moash is set up to be a direct foil for Kaladin in this particular scene by essentially adapting his own Bridge 4. And then he immediately fails to protect all of them because every single one of those people dies in the battle around Dolinar.
It's not all who die. There are
right?
At least because we see them again at the very end in the last Moash chapter.
So it's just isn't it like a chunk of each side that passes? Like Kaladin standing there.
Survives. Sa dies, I think.
Yeah, Sa definitely dies because I think that's something that Kaladin also reflects upon when he watches the scene.
Yeah. But it's where was it? It was here. Here, Moash is pickaxing whatever, and
whatever, we don't care.
When he heard another pig fall beside him, he spun, shocked. Ken, the beefy parch woman, started breaking rocks. Ken, you were freed from slavery. Your assault on the palace earned you the passion of mercy. Ken kept working. Nam and Paul stepped in, wearing war form. 2 others who had survived with him during the assault. Only a handful had. So there's a handful of them who have survived.
But it does feel like, because the thing that I'm thinking about this, because again, this might be me looking a bit too much into it, but considering that we're setting up Kaladin as some sort of not Kaladin, Moash as some sort of foil for Kaladin's particular moment, it's also very interesting to see that in those particular scenes, which we obviously also don't fully get from Moash's perspective, because that would be too much to ask for, we don't really get Moash giving a lot of a fuck about the singers as everything is happening. Yes, he seems surprised and also somewhat happy that, some have actually survived, but it is much less the almost obsessive need that Kaladin has to protect people. And it's just, again, an unfortunate thing where I'm over here I wouldn't necessarily mind that because I am completely fine with not every single character having this need to save people. But considering that this is directly set up to mirror Kaladin's engagement with Bridge 4, it just feels very unfortunate that once again Moash is not made to care overly much for the people.
The thing that I find very interesting though is that while Kaladin's main motivation is to protect people, for Moash, the thing is, he reacts very strongly to what he sees as injustice and as people in power oppressing others. So he doesn't care so much about the specific group. He cares that that group is being oppressed.
Yes.
Which I find really interesting.
And it would be very nice if we could present that in some sort of at least neutral way, but we cannot, because Moash obviously has to be the bad guy.
Obviously.
And he has to be the champion of odium because, yes.
Because, yeah.
I don't know. That's all I have for that.
I can't find this thing anymore that I wanted to.
That's okay.
To look for, because there was this very specific scene where Dalinar brings Venli into one of the visions. And it just shows such a fundamental misunderstanding about the situations and everything. Because it's shown as this unfortunate thing that they can't come to a conclusion, or what's it called? Solution. That's what I wanted to say. With the whole thing where it's like Venli very much points out that you are living like Dalinar is basically, hey, don't you want to leave us alone and just like, we can live in peace side by side, whatever. And Venli's like, yeah, but where would we live? Like, the people that you have called Parshmen so far, Alethkar is their home. This world is their home. Should they just fuck off somewhere else or whatever? And Dalinar doesn't have an answer to that. But like the way it's framed feels so much like Venli is unreasonable for expecting that people should stay. And there were like a few passages in this one where I was like, wow, this like really reads like Israel and Palestine, but from Israel's perspective.
I was thinking the same thing.
I was like,
There's also this whole like, okay, you know what?
Even a two-state solution offered by someone. I don't even remember by whom anymore. If it was Venli or Dalinar.
Again, maybe reading too much into this, but does anyone else remember the fact that the Knights Radiants are called the Shepherds of the People?
No.
Put that out there.
I do remember, like there is a lot of like, I don't know if it's just because, obviously Christianity is one of the Abrahamic religions, just like Judaism. But I do remember also the whole thing with like the stuff being holy, if it's read from the front and the back as the same, which I think is also a thing in Judaism. So there is, aside from Mormonism, also a lot of hints to Judaism, I believe, in the way the religion and the world building is done. However, that was just obviously Israel is different, but yeah.
So here's a question. So either Venli or Dalinar, somebody proposes a two-state solution. Do we go anywhere with this in Rhythm of War?
No, Odium breaks in. But I think even before that. I found it. Perfect.
I'm so proud of you.
First of all, we cannot once again get across it, which is a thing in this book that we haven't talked about, how singers are constantly in awe about how amazing humans are.
Oh, God.
Oh my God, the art. It drives me crazy.
Dalinar Kholin stood on the balcony and he was glowing. Neshua Kadal, radiant night. Without meaning to, she attuned to the rhythm of awe. Around Kholin, the balcony was stable. Boards trembled and quivered at his feet, but did not move into the sky. The balcony railing had ripped apart to either side of him, but where he held onto it with a firm grip, it remained secure. He was her enemy, and yet, long ago, these humans had resisted her gods. Yes, the enslavement of her cousins, the singers, was impossible to ignore. Still, the humans had fought, and won. The listeners remembered this as a song sung to the rhythm of awe, Neshua Kadal. So like it's so uncomfortable how everything is done here. And then it's actually before that part. I'll send you back soon. Please just hear me out. I need to know, what would a truce between our people cost? A truce, she asked to amusement, stopping near the balcony. A truce? Peace. No desolation, no war. What would it cost? Well, for a start, it would cost your kingdom. He grimaced. His words were dead, like those of all humans. But he wore his feelings on his face, so much passion and emotion. Is that why the Spran betrayed us for them? What is Alethkar to you? He said. I can help you build a new nation on the Shattered Plains, which so far we haven't seen the Shattered Plains as being particularly like habitable, yeah.
No, not really.
I will give you laborers to raise cities, ardents to teach any skill you want, because
they don't have skills themselves. Of course not.
Wealth has payment. in ransom for Kholinar and its people, a formal apology, whatever you demand. I demand that we keep Alethkar. His face became a mask of pain, his brow furrowed. Why must you live there? To you, Alethkar is a place to conquer, but it is my homeland. She attuned to reprimand. Don't you understand? The people who live there, the singers, my cousins, are from Alethkar. That is their homeland too. The only difference between them and you is that they were born as slaves and you as their masters. He winced. Perhaps some other accommodation then? A dividing of the kingdom? A parchment high prince? He seemed shocked to be considering it. She attuned to resolve. Your tone implies you know that would be impossible. There can be no accommodation, human. Send me from this place. We can meet on the battlefield. No, he seized her arm. I don't know what the accommodation will be, but we can find one. Let me prove to you that I want to negotiate instead of fight. You can start, she said to irritation, pulling away from him, by not insulting me. At least let us try a negotiation, please. And then, like, Odium comes, and she ends with, he's here, she whispered, then waved towards it. That's why there can't be a negotiation, human. He knows we don't need one. You want peace, surrender. Give yourselves up and hope that he doesn't care to destroy you. And then, before we end with everything, we do have to have that moment where she's just completely in awe of him. So
I want to say something else there as well, aside from everything that is very obvious, because I'm pretty sure that Steph's in my face said it all during the time that you read this thing. I would like to very quickly talk about the fact that Venli is still portrayed as one of the only listeners, because she is a listener from her clan. They do call themselves listeners because there is a difference between listeners and singers and fused and whatnot that is never fully explained because we don't really get a lot of chapters from their perspectives.
I think the way it is, you have the Dawn Singers, which were the original people of Roshar, which then turned into the fused. Then you have the singers who were usually fighting for the Dawn Singers, the singers that were betrayed by the Spren, and then you have the listeners, which were the singers that were not taken in by that one unmade during the False Desolation, and who also didn't want the Dawn Singers, the Fused, to come back.
Which is also the reason why the listeners still exist at the beginning of the book, because they weren't turned into the Parshmen, aka the slaves that don't have a mind of their own, which happened to all of the singers. Woohoo! I would like to talk about the fact that Venli herself is, at least in the journey that we so far got to witness of her, very much portrayed as the freedom fighter who dabbles with matters too large for her control, who then regrets her choices. Because that's what's happening with her. Like, we have this whole thing where she is the reason they discovered these, new Spren, which turn out to be old Spren, aka Odium Sprens, which then, take her people under control and turn them into mindless, bloodthirsty monsters. Again, that's a choice, that's just what I'm going to call it. So we have that. And then we finally get to have actual chapters, not just these interludes, which sometimes had a Shonai in book 2. We get actual chapters throughout the main story from a listener's perspective, which is Venli. And the most things she does is regret her choice in aligning herself with Odium and getting to know this other type of Spren, because for some reason she's pure enough to be able to have something happening with a kind of Spren that would also technically bond with humans. So we also never unpacked that, for anyone wondering.
We haven't unpacked so far why Sprens exactly bonded with humans and never with singers, because obviously they can bond with singers. And I do think that it's fair to say also, because Reliant has that moment where he's like, my people are dead, my people don't exist anymore, which we find out in Rhythm of War that that's not actually true. There are listener populations, because obviously, even if they have come from the same people, I do think it's fair to say to a certain degree that listeners and singers are different now.
Yes.
they have different cultures, probably. They, like, I mean, generally, yeah. There's not enough detail in the singer-listener culture, aside from the thing that we're constantly told that they don't have art, which I don't even want to begin to unpack why that's so problematic.
It just is, very much so.
It's
Thank you for listening.
Why it's so problematic that the people that are portrayed as, and I purposefully use this word right now, savage, are being portrayed as not having art, because colonialism also used the existence of art as a marker for civilization and development of a culture.
And how much worthy a culture was of being preserved and saved.
Yes. And it's
which
not
is like a very specific understanding of what art is.
Yes.
So.
And it's not just that we, you know, if it ended, that conversation ended with characters like Jasna, who think that they are culturally superior, having these thoughts of like, oh, I'm discovering this art from these people who I consider to be savages, right? It extends into them thinking it about themselves. It extends into being reinforced about art, the way that Shallan justifies what is good art. It extends into the way that Wit has art conversations with Shallan. It's just kind of like, at least there's consistency in what Brandon Sanderson thinks about art.
So I want to this right now. Basically, the surviving listeners have their own listener culture, and the singers basically have the culture of their slavers only, which would actually be a really interesting discussion, because it's this thing that it's like a lot with, you know, Black American culture, where because of slavery and because of slavery in how slavery in the US worked, a lot of Black American culture is less derived from African cultures than, for example, in South America or even in the Caribbean, where you have the origins a lot more still, I think, and it still developed its own culture and often like syncretized with Christianity, but also indigenous cultures. But so that would be a really interesting discussion of like, okay, what does millennia of being not just enslaved, but having your minds taken away in a very literal sense. So to the point where, you know, you couldn't even defy your masters and keep some small part of your culture alive. How do you find yourselves as a people again? That would be such an interesting discussion. But it's Sanderson we're talking about, so.
The discussion is just not happening. And like the thing again that just aggravates me to no end is even when he starts giving, in this case specifically, the listeners a voice, even when he starts including them to a certain degree in the chapters and gives them their own perspective, first of all, as we've established, it is incredibly human-centric regardless, because they have to look at humans and go, oh my god, they're so nice, and they're so good, and they have art, and they have brains to think of science. Whole thing, you know? So, first of all, we have that. But second of all, every single time he does it, it's from the perspective of characters who are shown to not align themselves with freedom fighters. And I use that term deliberately, right? So first we have Ashonai, who up until she gets possessed by a spren of odium is one of the voices of reason, which is also what causes the conflict between her and Venli in the interludes of the second book specifically, where Ashonai is basically like, I want my people to survive. I am also willing to negotiate with Dalinar. She doesn't know that he is Dalinar, but she knows that he's a very important commander. And so she's like, I want to negotiate. I want to do that because I think this is the only way to save my people, which is an understanding point to have, especially during the time that she has it, which is where the humans have essentially more or less started almost not just a war, but an extermination process, because they've gotten a lot better at fighting the listeners in the Shattered Plains, right? So she has that perspective, which in and of itself is perfectly valid, up until the point where she gets corrupted, and then all of a sudden she turns into a killing machine, who does not care anymore that both her people and the humans die in the path that she chooses. So all of a sudden, it's no longer about preserving culture, it is about killing. Just because, essentially. And later on, we get the entire thing, more or less in reverse, from Venli looking at everything she's done and going, fuck, I didn't mean to do that.
Who, by the way, Venli is not the same character that we meet in the first book.
No.
Like, on no level. Even if she had a change of heart or whatever. She just, like, is suddenly such a, like, she was never a meek character, but suddenly she's such a meek character because now we need her to be a good character or whatever.
Yeah, because a change of heart always has to come with one character being so incredibly outclassed that the only thing they can do is grovel at the ground. Because if we don't show Venli groveling at the ground in front of the Fused and Odium, how do we portray that the Fused and Odium are bad?
And then we have like the charge on Thailand City, and you have singers going, do we have to fight? They were good to us though. Like, some of them were nice. Where, like, I think it's completely valid to have like singers be like, no, we don't want to fight. Because again, by forcing them to fight and by forcing this war, you have once again have this narrative of you cannot free oppressed people, because as soon as the oppressed people are free, they will attack you back. Instead of, you know, sometimes oppressed people just want to be free. And yeah, it would be nice if we had restitution, but let's start with freedom because, you know, we just want to live our lives. So I think it's fair to have singers who are like, actually, we just want to live our lives. We want to fuck off somewhere. We do not care anymore. Like, and then you can have some who are like, no, actually, these people treated us badly all our lives, because even the nice ones did. I'm sorry.
100%. 100%. I think the nicest thing humans did to some of the, as they called them, parshmen, is just forget that they exist.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is the bar. That is it.
So, like, yeah, anyway.
It's
like,
such a complicated topic that Brandon Sanderson both tries to portray and then completely does not want to try to portray. Because what he wants is he does include, like, aspects of a conversation that could be interesting. Like, for instance, the moment we talk about when we say where Kaladin essentially gets, you know, chewed out by Sa, because Sa is like, you don't understand what it's like. We have been slaves, both in body and mind, and they never did that to you. So you don't understand what our lives have been like. We have moments like these where Brandon Sanderson either does want to try to portray social injustice the way that it should be, or at the very least thinks this would make an impactful emotional scene. But on the other hand, we then also have to consistently further the narrative of, if you try and fight for your freedom, you can only do so by being a villain. You can only do so by giving up your body to your quite literally insane ancestors. I am using the word as intended because all of the Fused are shown to be clinically insane, partially because they're not compatible to the bodies that they inhabit, and partially because technically they're supposed to be dead. And so bringing souls back from the dead is also not always the best thing to ensure that your souls are actually clinically sound. Which, again, is fair, would be an interesting point to look at, but the only thing Brandon Sanderson uses it for is to make his villains more dangerous. And I have a very big gripe with that, because why?
We meet, like, one Fused who's sane, and that's, like, Leshwi.
Yes. And I do think that Leshwi is an interesting character in and of herself. I think that she makes one of the more fascinating aspects of, like, the new cast we get introduced to in book 3 and 4. But that's also it. That is what we get. That's the bottom line of it. And it's so disappointing.
So I would actually like to, like, from my side, I would like to talk about one last thing, which is how the entire book of Oathbringer is unnecessary. I have never read a book with such bad middle book syndrome. Like, Kholinar fell. What even happened in Kholinar? I mean, sure, we had the thing with Kaladin and Elhokar dying, but that could have happened somewhere else just as well.
We also had
Azure is here for Cosmere reasons. Doesn't add anything.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Okay, so just for clarity before I ask my question, the reason that we found out about Asudin and everything that was happening in Kholinar was because Kaladin, Elhokar, and crew went back there to specifically turn on the Oath Gate, right?
More or less, yes.
Okay.
It was like, the thing was that they lost contact with Kholinar because the span reads weren't working anymore. So it was like, let's figure out what is happening there. Also, there's an Oath Gate in Kholinar, so it'd be nice to have another one.
Okay.
Basically, 2 birds with 1 stone kind of situation.
And also, Elhokar's family is in Kholinar, and let's get that back. Like, everyone forgot about them, so...
Right. Okay, so that's going to lead into my next question. Timeline question. Do we get any semblance of how long it's been since they lost contact with Kholinar?
I don't think so.
I
don't remember it.
I think somewhere around the beginning of the book.
Okay.
Because the reason I think why they lost contact, I don't know if the Unmade also had something to do with that, but I think the main reason was that they couldn't use span reads anymore, because every time they used span reads, the fuse came.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in that case, it's been long enough, I would say, between the beginning of the book and when they actually get to the Oath Gate, because there's a lot of things that happen. There's a couple high storms, a couple ever storms. There's a couple like different events that take a significant amount of time. Why in none of that did we get, if we want Elhokar to be such a good husband, father, considerate, king, whatever, why did in between none of that we never get him having the thought, maybe I should go check on my wife and kids?
I think he wants to, like, we get him wanting to check it out earlier. I think it's as soon, like, when he tells Dalinar that he's now High King, I think that's the first time that Elhokar wants to start a mission, but he has to wait first until Kaladin is back because he wants to take Kaladin. And because they need to go with, like, the Wind Runners and stuff.
Okay.
I think it was something like that.
I think the problem, though, is that while there are, like, reasons as to why they don't immediately go to Kholinar, which mostly is, you know, we need Windrunners, which means we specifically need Kaladin because the rest of them are not fully fledged Windrunners yet, which, you know, fair enough. I think the problem is partially maybe also because of, like, the whole POV situation, but the problem is that there is just no sense of urgency. Right up until the very moment where everyone's just like, oh yeah, let's go to Kholinar, and then they are in Kholinar and they're like, oh shit, well this looks like a shithole. What happened?
Yeah, it's like, the thing is why this book feels like such a non-book is, like, it feels like the main objective of this book would be to unite everyone. Yeah. However, we in fact get, I think, like 2 or 3 chapters of all the monarchs actually together. It drags for a really long time for Dalinar to write with everyone, whatever. While he does that, we have our first Unmade, which really feels like, I don't know, it feels like the whole passage with Kholinar in between should have just not existed. But just, like, introducing the Unmade, and then Kholinar is, I guess, a vehicle where you can then introduce 2 more Unmade, because you have, like, the Thrill, you have Sacha Anat, you have, who I think is she the one in the tower? I think she's the one in the tower. You have the one in the Oath Gate, and then the one that bonds with Aesudan. So we have 4 out of the 9 Unmade in this book. But it just feels like a whole lot of, like, there's a lot of different things happening, but it doesn't really feel like anything is moving the the story forward, or what, like we're making any really important steps, but it also doesn't really feel like anything that's happening is like a setback to what's going on.
I think another issue that I specifically have with the Kholinar plot is the fact that it feels so inherently removed from everything we've done so far, because the characters just conveniently forget about the fact that Kholinar might be important. And then at some point it's just like, oh yeah, you know what, maybe we should check this out now. And the problem isn't necessarily always or entirely that they spend so much time in Kholinar that could have been used just about anywhere else more efficiently. The problem is also just partially that it feels like no one should even give a fuck about Kholinar, because it's not introduced as any kind of issue. We start in the Shattered Plains with book 1, we continue being in the Shattered Plains in book 2, and in book 3, suddenly everyone who is from Kholinar, because the only person in the main cast who is not from there are Shallan and Kaladin, suddenly everyone remembers that Kholinar is a thing, and that we should do something about the current dangerous situation that might or might not be brewing there. And everything in this world feels so incredibly disconnected from each other, to the point where it feels like Brandon Sanderson himself genuinely forgot about the fact that he should have included something there.
Yeah. I feel like that's a result of him just trying to include everything. Like,
yes,
it's that's happening. We have a murder mystery happening. We have Shadesmar happening. We have the Parshman POVs. We have Moash. We have, like, there's just way too many things happening. This book, if he wanted it so much to be more effective, take out the whole Kholinar thing. Fine, let all these unmade happen in Urithiru. Let them happen somewhere else. Like, this book could have been half as long and been a lot more successful.
Yeah, yes. But also that's the thing, like the two things, the two things that feel like they're actually important for future books going forward in this one is the unmade, possibly. I don't remember how much of them were in the second book, although it feels like the unmade were introduced and they're just a concept, and I don't really know why we need them even. But I might be wrong, because I didn't
even remember that we had 9. I'm gonna be honest. You said so and so many of the 9 unmade, and I was like, oh, we had 9 of those. Interesting.
No, I remember that for a specific reason. And the second thing is like the whole, okay, humans aren't native to Roshar. The reason why I remembered is because, like, the unmade, I think in one of the last parts of the book, like, talking about the unmade is the epigraphs, which I don't think I treat it as exposition by now. It's exposition needs to be given in a way where we want to know it and where it's immediately pertinent to know this. Otherwise, you won't remember.
Yeah.
I mean, for some nerds will, but you won't remember. But I remember it was 9 because it was like, we know of 8 unmade. However, there must be 9 because 9 is an unholy number or something along those lines.
Okay.
And it's unholy because it's not a symmetrical number. And my brain was like, how is 9 not a symmetrical number? It's like a, what's it called?
It's the Trinity. It could be the trifecta if you break it up.
Like a when you put a up to thing. Mathematically. Anyway, if you want an unsymmetrical number, choose a prime number.
Yeah.
7. Take 5. Take 11. Those are unsymmetrical numbers. 9 is not an unsymmetrical number.
I want to add to this that, okay, so Odium, and I guess I don't know if it's so much the unmade, but Odium has that conversation with Dalinar, I think, where he expresses himself as like the manifestation of passion, right? And these kind of emotions. And I feel like there is something really uncomfortable for me in the idea that the singers and the Parshmen and the Fused, who are representative of the indigenous peoples of this world, are being ruled by a villain that is a manifestation of passion, and that the heroes are following something that is, quote unquote, more logical.
Yeah, and
I
it's
see it.
also not set up so far in the book narratively. Like in Mistborn, at least you had ruin and preservation, right? But like narratively, quite soon, I think it was set up somewhat that the problem with ruin and preservation is that you can't have just one or the other, but that they need each
Yes.
other to stay in balance. Because with preservation, you don't have movement, you don't have development, but ruin destroys everything.
Yes, that is a very big point at the end of the trilogy, in my opinion.
Yeah, but even earlier, it's already kind of set up like that.
Yeah.
With this one, even if you wanted odium to not be like singularly negative, and actually cultivation, odium, and honor need each other to stay in balance with each other, it's narratively not set up.
That is very true.
So,
and like, we are all fully aware that odium can call himself the ruler of passion all he wants. That does not necessarily have to make it true, because he is very much capable of lying. That's not the point. The point is that there is a very uncomfortable connotation here that makes being ruled by passion, being influenced by passion, or being on the side of passion makes you very easily into a bad person. Which is also further expounded upon, because odium does quite literally means I hate. Yeah. Like, it's right there. If you know one word in Latin, you know that it's right there. So, it's great.
Which also is weird to me, to be honest. Because, like, where did the sun Latin come from?
You could have just called him passion, to be quite honest. Like, it would have been so much more interesting as a whole. Like, it would still have been uncomfortable with the connotation situation, but it would have been so much more interesting if it was like, the villain we're fighting is passion.
Also, not gonna lie, like, as someone who has never had Latin, done Latin, whatever, when I first read them, I was so confused because it was like honor, cultivation, and odium?
Oh, yeah, I was confused too, but I was also over here like, I immediately know what this means, so thank you, I guess, for giving the villain a very obvious name and then just going with it, I guess. Like, I don't know if at some point it's going to be more set up that maybe there is something kind of similar going on with, like, preservation ruin, in the sense of, like, you do need odium because he does represent passion in a way, even if passion can also be used to I don't know, be angry all the time, whatever the fuck that means.
But again, it's not set up.
It's not set up whatsoever, and even if it starts happening in, like, book 5 or something, it's far too late for that, my man, because we have spent over 5,000 pages at this point not making that point. So,
yeah.
God, can you guys just feel the collective suffering we went through reading this book?
God.
But hey. We are now more than halfway through.
Yay!
Oh. This is
There's only one reread left. I don't know if Wind and Truth will be better because it's not a reread.
That is something for future us to live through. You know what we should do? You know what we should do specifically for the 5th book? We should try to do some meetups where we just read together, just so we can rant in person and not just through the Discord.
As someone who has experienced buddy reading with you, I am not sure how well that works.
That is true, considering the speed at which you read.
I'm not gonna lie, you won't be able to, like, rant about anything, even spoilerless. Because my motivation will just go down.
You know what? That's fair. Steph, are you willing to live with that?
I guess. I mean, I'm already here. I'm not going to put this past 6 months to waste and go all in.
Yeah. Is there anything we still need to concretely say about this book?
Okay. Well, 2 things. One, maybe we should wrap it up soon. One, because it's been almost 3.5 hours. 2, because I'm starving. But
yes, that's why I was asking. Is there something?
But I'm just gonna go to our pin board, which we haven't looked at this entire time. I think yeah. So we touched on. did we? What did we touch on here?
We did touch on Moash and Elhokar.
Just we talked about
a little bit.
this.
Yes.
I
think Liren and Kaladin is more so a rhythm of war.
Yeah, it comes back.
Definitely, because that's where we have the big issues with Liren and what happens to his character and everything.
Yeah, we've talked about this, I think, extensively.
We talked about Dalinar, not necessarily his authoritarianism, but it comes through a lot in this book with like every time he's annoyed about bureaucracy and he's annoyed about the other, like why can't he just like force all the other people to listen or whatever.
Mm-hmm. He's such a meathead. I'm so sick of him. Okay. Okay, so that being said, do we want to clear out any of these tabs and add new ones to come back to in Rhythm of War?
I think I would love to see, because I do not remember a hell of a lot from Rhythm of War. I'm not gonna lie, but I think I would like to see if we can revisit Venli as a character.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like
I think Venli went off with the other listeners by the end.
Yeah, that might be it. And I would like to revisit her character specifically because of how like everything that happens with her character is kind of like presented in books 2 and 3, and I want to see what book 4 does with that. So
okay, so I'm you know what, I think I might just leave all of these because they do. We hope that they become relevant later. So I'll just add. Well, I'll get rid of this one, I guess, because we're done talking about Gavilar's death. I think.
Yeah, I mean, we might accidentally start revisiting it if we get yet another perspective on Gavilar's death in book 5. But
that's true.
That's a different thing altogether. We'll cross that bridge when we fucking get to it.
Maybe it was Gavilar's perspective, or was that the last book? No, it was Navani's perspective, right?
Yeah, the fourth one was Navani's perspective.
Oh, really? That's who we're. I forgot about that. What? No.
Suddenly everyone was like, Gavilar is such a dick, and he's such an abusive husband and person, and we didn't care that Dalinar is also an abusive husband because, it doesn't care that it's Evie. No one cares that it's Evie because he's nice to Navani or something.
Yeah, like he respects Navani being a scholar, which first of all, she's not a scholar, but whatever.
No. All it proves is that he had it in him the entire time to be like somewhat of a decent husband, and he just didn't do it because of who it was, which just enforces the fact that he is abusive.
Correct.
So
amazing.
Woo. Any other tabs you want to add? Things to look out for?
I can't think anymore.
Same. Okay.
I mean, I'm pretty sure, we have a lot of characters we want to look at a bit more closely. Like we talked about Elhokar now. He's not going to come up anymore because he's dead. Oh no, what a shame. We are going to listen. I never gave a fuck about him.
At any point.
I assume I'm gonna wanna talk about Teft next book.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good point.
Because he's another character that dies for Kaladin's character development, but we actually get POVs from his perspective. So
that's true. We did even get some in this book already. Like a few, very few scattered throughout, but we did get some. So yay.
Yay.
Yeah, I did find it really silly because, like, when he says the words, it's like, I will protect even the ones I hate, even if the one I hate most is myself. But, like, he doesn't protect himself in that situation because it's like the Oritiro is being attacked, and, like, outside, some people of Bridge 4 are dying fighting against the singers, and he's like hidden away. And how does he protect himself in that situation? Like by going out and fighting. How does he protect himself? Wouldn't he protect himself if he stays hidden? Like,
yes.
Anyway,
questions.
questions we don't have answers to. Because why would we have answers to them? Question, like, do y'all remember, is Leshwi a character later on as well? I think she is, right?
I think we might get interlude POVs from her.
Because, like, isn't there also this whole thing between Leshwi and Navani? Am I making that up?
I don't remember.
Yeah,
Isn't Leshwi the one who takes control of Urithiru and everything?
No, that's Raboniel.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so, like, I want to talk about that kind of dynamic. Specifically, I want to talk more about the fused and everything that's coming up.
Okay.
Which is not, like, limited to one character, because I do think that, you know, it's fine that the fused are not discussed as much in this book, because this is the first time they legitimately show up. I'm okay with that. But I want to see what happens after this, because I have things to say about the fused concept.
So, okay, so what do you want me to write here then?
Talking about the fused?
Yeah.
Looking at the fused?
Yeah. Okay. Is it the fall of, is there a fall of Urithiru in the next book?
Yeah.
Yeah. The next book
Okay.
is the one where Urithiru gets taken over.
Yes. Okay, I remember that. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Leshwi.
That's like
Sorry.
Well, all right. Then I guess we have things to talk about when it comes to Leshwi. Thank you very much, Josh, for remembering things once again, because we ain't shit with
This is, by the way, what it looks like in the Discord.
Yeah. Us talking shit and Josh being like, hey, you know, like, I'm not trying to interrupt you here, but maybe you would like to have this information.
Yes, thank you.
And then Alex enjoying our suffering.
Yeah. I told him today that I didn't want to keep on reading because I did read a little bit more of the book today, and he just went like, yeah, but you're doing it to yourself, so like it's kind of your fault. And then immediately followed it up with, if that sounds harsh, I personally think that you deserve it because, you know, you can keep going through Sanderson, so you can keep going through me being harsh to you. And I was like, you know what, that's a good point. That's fine. I deserve that.
Like my like we used to say SSKM, so it's short can midnight. So it's in translation it's your own fault. I don't have empathy.
Yeah.
Or sympathy, rather.
It's just like looking at you and being like, well, you did this to yourself, so at this point I'm just gonna laugh at your suffering. I'm like, you know what, that's fair. I do deserve it.
We knew exactly what we were getting ourselves into. It's fine.
Oh God.
But yes, I would say 3.5 hours is a good time to stop things.
It sure is.
Also, I really need to cook if I want to eat before 10 o'clock. So
please do that.
I'll make it for 10 o'clock. But yeah, as always, thanks everyone for listening. This time was a roller coaster of all over the place. Comments on everything that we discussed, as always, is very welcome. We didn't do the spiel at the beginning this time. We're not doing this because we begrudge anyone loving Sanderson. We honestly mostly don't care. We just don't get it a lot of times. So, you know, if you have different viewpoints, you're welcome to politely say those in the comments down below. If you say bullshit, we mostly won't react. I might react, depending on how I feel, to be honest. It
depends on the time of day and our mood.
Yeah, and how much I hate myself right now.
If you have clarification issues, you're also very welcome to put them down below, because I will be honest, I kind of black out sometimes when I start talking, so I have no idea if I'm making sense or not, which Sarah is very familiar with, because that's basically the content of every single one of our voice messages.
And we'll probably see each other again, like, sometimes
October,
sometime mid-November.
November.
Also, yes, what Josh said. You know, if Josh can handle being in a group chat with us, where we are, to be honest, way worse and way worse.
Yes. That's where we hash out all the thoughts before we come on here.
That
Yeah,
is where we
polish
start
them.
hating on everything, and then we collect the hate and go, hold on, we need to actually formulate an argument now.
And then Josh is like, here's some more information so you can read more correctly.
Anyone who thinks that this is not an MCU situation where you have to have multiple sources that are not directly Stormlight Archive books, I'm sorry, I disagree.
I love it. I love it so much. When I compared it to the MCU and my Sanderson is bad at world building, I got so many comments being like, it's not that good at MCU though. And like since then, I've seen at least like 20 or something TikToks of fans being like, it's the MCU, but for fantasy. It's like,
I'm sure Brandon Sanderson legitimately said it himself at some point too.
Yeah.
Like, not that we really care about his opinion anymore, but it is out there. So,
which, by the way,
know.
sucks because I write so much about Sanderson and I Google stuff a lot while I read. TikTok, my FYP thinks I like Sanderson, so it sends me videos by Sanderson fans. Why?
I'm very sorry. You're taking the fall for both of us because I'm not on TikTok.
Anyway, did I forget to mention anything? Yeah, if you haven't seen the first two videos for some reason, they will be linked down below. Obviously, Steff's and Sylla's channels will also be linked down below, so definitely go and check them out too. I will try to hopefully quite soon upload my Gender and the Stormlight Archive video, but I for some reason decided to put down bullet points, and so I still need to write those. So yeah, I think I have everything.
Yeah, like we said, the next live show is going to be somewhere in November. We're not entirely sure yet when, and we also don't entirely yet know on what channel, but we'll figure it out.
Yes.
Because we're adults and we know how to handle it. Maybe.
But I'm sure there'll be an announcement coming. And since we don't know on whose channel it's gonna be, you're just gonna have to subscribe to all of us. It's like,
what a shame.
Like
That's so sad.
really, like,
damn.
So
okay, yeah. I think we did it.
We did it. So I'm just gonna say bye, and I'm gonna stop the stream.
Bye,
guys.